Hey friends, my name is Joey and welcome back to my channel, Gender Not Found. Um, so, ugh, trying to do my intro. I'm good today. I'm better than yesterday. Um, my rats are sleeping right now and the house, the smell in the house has changed since I got rats home. Like, the smell in the living room is definitely different since I brought rats home. It's not like a bad smell, but just, unless I don't clean out the cage, then it gets stinky, but it's just like you can clearly tell that there's rats in the room, when you walk in, so. But anyway, the rats are sleeping right now. They actually spend the majority of the day sleeping, and I did try and take them out for playtime, but it didn't go very well. Like I said, wait, I already told the story. Never mind. It's fine. But anyway, now onwards to my book, to the recording. So I really want to do like a 3 hour recording at least today. Like, I want to do a 3 hour recording of a guardian angel. Um, and then maybe if I still have time left and I want to do some other recordings, or if I decide I want to do some other recordings, I might do an hour or two of trying to impress Matt. Right now it's 10:30, not even, so I have all the time in the world. My mom doesn't get home till 4:30ish. And even then she has a meeting, so I think so I really want to do a 3 hour recording today, at least, of a guardian angel, and then I'll decide if I want to do more or whatever. But I really want to put up I don't know, it's probably gonna be 6 or 7 chapters at least. I'm expecting it to be 6 chapters at least because the longer chapters are about half an hour-ish and the shorter chapters are 10 to 15 minutes. Like, I've had chapters that I own that were only 7 or 8 minutes to read, and then I've had chapters that were 30 to 35 minutes to read. I just put up chapter 30, which I think was about 38 minutes, but I think a few minutes of that was introduction and outro and stuff. So, but regardless of that, regardless of that, I wanted to do a really long recording today. And since I have a hard drive, it's a 1 terabyte hard drive, by the way. Hang on 1 second. Actually, I'm gonna pause this. So, as far as what as far as having a 1 terabyte hard drive, I just looked it up, how many gigabytes are in a terabyte, and there's 1,000 gigabytes. And I'm pretty sure my computer is 32 to 64 gigabytes. So that is so much less. That is, hang on, I'm gonna do some more math. Okay, I found some answers. 250,000 pictures taken with a 12 megapixel camera, 250 movies, or 500 hours of HD video, or 6.5 million document pages, commonly stored as office files, PDFs, and presentations. So I can, continue writing for probably my entire life on this hard drive, and I can store, as much video as I want on it. I can store up to 500 hours of video. So I can record for 500 hours. Hang on. So if I record for 3 hours a day, I just did the math, 150, wait, no, 500 divided by 3, it's 160, it's roughly 166 days of video that I can store on there. So that's a third of a year, or maybe more than a third of a year. Hang on. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a freaking lot. So, hang on. Okay, I just did a little more math. I did, 1000 gigabytes divided by 64 gigabytes, because I'm pretty sure that's how much my computer is. It's 64 gigabytes, and it's roughly 15 times more storage than my computer has on itself. And when I asked my mom for like a hard drive, like an external hard drive, because I've been having so many problems with my computer, and I almost lost all that data over like a couple summers ago. You guys remember that? That was a really shitty time. That was a really difficult time. And then I spent months like getting the data back and, working working everything out to resolve my problems. But so and the guy at the place where I take my computer to get fixed, he said I should use an external hard drive for storage because it's one of the best ways to store your stuff. Like obviously there's also the cloud and stuff like that, but I got that erased, and I don't even have that much storage to put. So like it gave up after a while and said I didn't have enough storage, so I couldn't store everything. But with this 1 terabyte hard drive, like I have so much storage. And when I asked my mom for an external hard drive, I expected her to get me like a 32 gigabyte or 64 gigabyte one. But having this 1 terabyte one is so much better because I just found out how much storage I can actually store. So I can record for literally 500 hours and then store it on my hard drive and I'll still be fine. And what I'm planning to do with the longer like uploads now, I wanted to record for several hours a day, at least on the days that I, don't have anything else going on. Or maybe I can even record for like 3 hours on Friday or whatever. But anyway, my point is like if I have a bigger upload that doesn't all fit on my computer, I'm gonna transfer like the recordings to the hard drive, and then I'm gonna use PowerDirector to edit the video like I usually do. But instead of saving it to my edited YouTube videos file on my computer, I'm gonna save it to a new folder that I'm gonna make on my hard drive, and then I'm gonna put it there, and then I'll just upload it to YouTube from the hard drive instead of from the computer, because that way I can fit more on there. Because you guys know I've run into problems in the past, and even I was reading Don't Cry Baby. There would have been another chapter up if I hadn't like gotten an error message in the middle of it. Like an error message popped up. It my camera stopped recording and I never knew because I didn't get like an error message or anything. So my camera just literally stopped recording and I didn't realize it until I was done the recording, and it didn't so it only recorded about half the chapter, and it was really pissed me off. Like even you guys know that the camera cut out during one of my chapters of A Guardian Angel, and I literally had to like um cut off part of the end and then edit it back together and then re-record that ending part and then like edit it together so that it would be a proper chapter. So it was really frustrating to do. But but now if I have like a longer video or whatever, I can like save it to the hard drive and then upload it from YouTube from the hard drive, if I need to, like if I have a longer video, because you guys know I've had so many issues with like videos that I've had so many issues with videos in the past, and videos just stopping in the middle, videos not recording, because I don't have enough space, and having problems with like editing videos because I don't have enough space, or like rendering my videos because I don't have enough space, and it's really frustrating. But this way I can like save it to the hard drive and upload it from the hard drive. And then you guys know like I delete all my edited videos after I've posted them, because there's no sense in keeping them because now they're uploaded to YouTube. They're on the internet forever, so, unless something goes terribly wrong. But regardless of anything, I'm good with the way things are right now, and, I'm good with deleting edited YouTube videos. That reminds me, I should delete the YouTube videos that I edited over the last couple of days and post. Okay, just did. And there was like a few videos there, so I'm glad I checked in on that. I don't know how much I'm gonna be able to actually record on this before I have to like, you know, transfer it to my hard drive, but I'm gonna try and record as much as I can. So let's go. Okay, let's read, because I'm, oh boy. it's gonna probably make me do a captcha thing again, so hang on. File not found, what the heck? There we go. Oh, there was no captcha this time. Okay, that was weird. But anyway, so we're on chapter 31. We made it to chapter 30 in the last video, which was amazing. And I know I took a break from this yesterday. I took a break from a guardian angel yesterday. I recorded a few chapters of Trying to Impress Matt instead because like this book is intense and, the actual Trying to Impress Matt is just kind of fun and cute and fluffy and, fluffy romance and stuff. And it's not like this book gets intense with Marshall having cancer and like Fiona almost getting raped by her foster father and like, you know, Iggy getting kicked out of the house with his sister and stuff like that. There's a lot of insane stuff. So, sometimes you just need like a break from the madness, and Trying to Impress Matt was a really good break for me, so I'm really glad I did that. Even though I was really looking forward to seeing how this book went, but I needed a break. I needed a break. And even though I took that couple of days off, I wanted to read something else. And, I've been in the middle of Trying to Impress Matt too. But I like uploading this more often because, I'm really enjoying how this is going. And also, we have way more of this than Trying to Impress Matt. I'm pretty sure Trying to Impress Matt has like 40 chapters in total, and it's already finished. So, and this one actually isn't finished. Actually, funny thing, I was looking at the very first video I did of this when I did chapter 1 way back like 7 months ago. And actually, it's funny because when I first uploaded the first chapter of this 7 months ago, there was only 70 chapters of this. So the chapters have almost now doubled. So this person's been updating their book a lot. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next. So it's going really well, and I'm so enjoying this. I'm really loving like these daily fiction uploads. You guys know that I didn't upload for a couple days because my computer was literally getting fixed, and it was really frustrating. And then, I thought I was going to get it back on Tuesday evening, and I was going to be able to record for you guys on Wednesday, but then that didn't happen. So, and I was actually lucky that I got to record on Wednesday because my mom had a meeting, so I was able to record several chapters of one of my books. But if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have been able to record. But so I got lucky actually because, but I was really happy to use that time to record anyway. So, okay, this has been a really, really, really long intro. So now we're gonna actually read. Okay. Oh, alright, this is interesting. Chapter 31, Twin Powers Activate. It's a day in the life of Iggy, and most of it will be in his POV. I can't sleep. I hate it when I can't sleep. This sucks. I hate being awake. There is way too much to think about. Like celebrities. Who in their right mind would name their kid Apple or Sparkle or Jeffrey? Why mess everyone up with a G? Sighing, I stood up, pushing the blanket off, watching as it pooled on the floor. I'm thirsty, and if I'm thirsty, I can't sleep. Watching, Walking into the kitchen, I reach into a cabinet for a glass, pulling out a spotless one. I can't help myself as I grin, knowing that it was Fiona's doing. Fiona's fantastic. She's funny, she's gorgeous, and she cares about everyone. If it weren't for the fact that she was with Marshall, I'd steal her all for myself. I still kind of want to because that heart-stopping feeling I got when I first met her, I still get. But she's my best friend's girl, and I couldn't do that to him. Reaching into the freezer, I grabbed the ice tray, cracking it loudly to loosen the cubes, wincing at the sound, pausing and listening for any source of life roused by the noise. None. Good. Looking in the fridge, I find lemonade. Do I like lemonade? I try it right from the pitcher and practically choke on a lemon, gagging. It's lemon water. I feel betrayed. Then I realize that it might be for Marshall's stomach. He'd dump a crapload of sugar in that. Looking through the cabinets, I spot the 5-pound bag of sugar and begin pouring it into the picture. Half the bag's gone in the blink of an eye, and quickly I righted the bag, now staring awkwardly at the picture. The liquid was so close to overflowing. Do I dare move it and get bitter lemon crap everywhere? Yes! No! What's that thing for soup? The deep spoon? Ember would know. I think it starts with an L. Lay spoon. Not even close. Screw this, I'm just gonna drink it. I slipped the edge of the pitcher, sipping and watching as the level of liquid went down. I twitched at the bitter taste and, grabbing a spoon, began stirring in the sugar. I wonder if Mo still has that membership at that boxer's gym. I could really punch the hell out of something. I mumbled to myself, still stirring the liquid concoction I've created. I take a sip from the spoon, and it's not half bad. People would drink that. People dying of thirst wouldn't drink that. I hear my loud groan of annoyance and quickly cut it off, not wanting to wake Marshall, Fiona, or Ember. That chick was scary when woken from her slumber. Emma wouldn't kill me, though. Cleaning up my mess, I reluctantly put the pitcher back into the fridge. Emma wouldn't kill me, though. Cleaning up my mess, I reluctantly put the picture back into the fridge and just stick with tap water where I'm safe. After drinking my icy cool water, I go and lay back on the couch. The sun's coming up already. Closing my eyes, I try to sleep, still wondering what the heck that La Deep spoon was called. I don't know how much time has passed. I was still thinking of the name of that spoon. I hate when this happens. Emma's usually awake during my brain dead moments, and the best part is I can give her my description of what I'm thinking of, and she nails it every time. I still can't believe she got therapist out of feelings hookers or a manta ray from sea pancake. One would think I'm crazy here mumbling to myself. Deep spoon, lady. It's a ladle, I shout, sitting up, excited that I finally remembered in that exact moment, making eye contact with Fiona, who's staring at me in concern. Glob, she's beautiful. Already I can feel my face burning in embarrassment as I laugh awkwardly, trying to play it cool. The best way to distract Fiona was to get her mad. Morning, Fifi, I say nonchalantly, now folding my arms under my head and lying back down. I watched the sour look cross her face for the briefest moments, but concern remains dominant. FP, what are you doing here? Is something wrong? She asked softly, now leaning on the back of the couch. I opened my mouth to respond, but what can I say? My parents hate me, so my sister and I left. I knew I wouldn't be able to handle seeing that saddened look in her eyes directed at me, not when I was already squished up inside. It's nothing to worry about, girlie, I said with a fake grin, the one everyone was so fooled by. Me and Emma just need a place to lay over for a few days. They were simple, to the point, and enough information to satisfy that blonde beauty. Crap, she has that look on, that searching look she gives Marsh when he's lying. Change the subject. Gotta change the subject. FP, are you? I poured half a bag of sugar into that lemon water in the fridge, I said quickly. Huh? Success. Now she's confused. She's doing that cute nose scrunch thing. Don't worry about it. It's a family recipe, I said quickly, waving my hands as I hauled serious ass into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Why do I run from everything? Seriously, this habit will kick me in the ass someday. Turning on the tap, I let the water run to make it seem like I was doing something. Suddenly, I hear a shout of panic and a crash, and faster than a flash, I'm out the door, leaving the water to run. I hop over the couch and find Marshall pinching the bridge of his nose, letting out a slow sigh as Fiona fussed over him. I was glad to see he was okay, seeing how it sounded like he'd fallen down the entire flight of stairs. Are you sure you're okay, Marsh? Fiona asked, radiating concern and love. I wonder if he has any idea how lucky he is. I'm fine, Fee, just a biff. I'm not gonna die, he said quietly. What is it, the first day with your new feet, Marsh? I asked, glad he's okay, and completely unable to not bust his balls once in a while. The hell are you doing here? Blunt and to the point was annoyed, injured Marshall. My buddy was back to normal. I try to sound hurt and insulted. It's beyond easy. Marshall, I thought we were friends. Dude, my feelings. Fiona's falling for it. Marshall's been around me enough not to. That can be used to my advantage. Fiona, why is Marshall so mean to me? I asked with a pout, watching as those beautiful baby blues widen. Marsh, be nice to FP, the blonde said, giving him a look. Come on, he's faking, the dark-haired teen said with a scowl. I knew that Fiona was fiercely protective of her friends and decided to fess up to being the bad guy. Yeah, I am. Oh, sweet, gullible Fifi. Call me that again and I'll beat you, she said with a smirk as she made her way into the kitchen. I'm gonna go shower, Marshall called, still using the walls and couches for stabilization. Before he could get in there, Fiona hurried back out. No, what if you fall in there? I can't, I. Her face was burning red at the thought of having to help Marshall in the tub. Quickly, she turned to me. FP? No. Oh, Glob, no. It was the look. I shared a quick glance with Marshall, and instantaneously we both understand. Hell no, he's not going to be in there while I bathe. Yeah, I like girls. I don't want to see his junk. I practically screeched. To hell with my sister killing me. That would be preferable to seeing my bro in the nude. You don't have to see anything. Just make sure he doesn't fall, please. Ah, those eyes. Fine, just stop looking at me like that. I mumbled, watching as she flounced off happily. Turning, I glowered at the wall before sighing. All right, let's do this, but I have ground rules, I said, walking my friend into the bathroom. Fiona came to check on us 20 minutes later, and after 3 slips, I've had enough. What's taking you guys so long? The water shut off 10 minutes ago, she said, knocking and cracking the door open. You can come in, girlie. He's decent enough, I said, watching as Fiona peeked in. Instead of a shower, I'd filled the tub with crap tons of bubbles, and we both agreed that it would be in everyone's best interest that he kept his drawers on. This is embarrassing, Marshall said with a scowl, his knees poking above the bubbles, looking much like an overgrown child. Blame that on your equilibrium, dude. If you could keep balance, I wouldn't have stuck your ass in the tub. Bite me. Not in your life, sport. Gross, I said, throwing the face cloth at him, watching as it slapped against his head, sending his hair up at an odd angle. Fee, you want to take over here? I'll be back to help with him getting dressed. Not giving her an option, I walked from the room. Ember was up. I could tell by the smell of food coming from the kitchen, and being the awesome brother I am, I walked over and sat on the counter out of her way. Morning, sunshine. Going breakfast crazy on us this morning? I asked, watching as she rolled her eyes. Yeah, Ig, it's just a few things, nothing much. Are you okay after last night? She asked, and for once I was glad Fiona wasn't in the room. Soon enough, I began pouring out my questions, barely breathing in between them. How could my sister ever see me as a good person with all I've done? Why do you have so much faith in me, Emma? You've seen me completely shit-faced. You've seen what I've done. Everything I touch or care about in the slightest, I find a way to destroy it. How can you stand there and still think I'm redeemable? How can you know with such conviction that there's still a chance for me when I've all but given up on myself? Mom and Dad have given up on me. Why haven't you? I watched as she froze in place with that. I just heard her look on her face. Crap. Iggy, why can't you see what I see in you? She asked sincerely, waiting for my reply, and not knowing what to say, I just shrugged my shoulders, looking away from her. I don't know. It's because Mom and Dad got it into your head that you're less of a person because you were a bit of a troublemaker. Ig, that's not true. You are a good person. I meant what I said last night. When it counts, you're the best person in a pinch, Iggy. You're dependable, you care more than you let on, and you have a big heart. What part of that could possibly be bad, Ig? Have more faith in yourself, Ember said with a smile, standing in front of me and wiping my cheek. Now stop crying, you big baby, she said playfully. I hadn't even realized I was crying. Quickly I dried my eyes. I never understood how she always had the ability to lift my spirits like she did, and almost as if she could read my mind, my little sister grinned at me. Wonder Twin powers activate, she said with a wink. Shape of a sexy redhead. I laughed and played along with her. Form of an awesome bassist. Emma took a short step near me, extending her fist, and I bumped it. We're not your average awesome, Emma said as she went back to her cooking. Nah, but we're flippin' weird enough, I said with a grin, watching as she continued to cook. Breakfast's going to be ready soon, so go see if they're finishing up in there, Ember said, nodding towards the bathroom. Hopping from the counter, I walked back to the bathroom, entering and watching as Fiona was happily washing Marshall's hair. I don't know if it was embarrassment or annoyance, but his face sure was red. Breakfast's going to be ready soon. Time to wrap it up, ladies and gentlemen, I said, clapping my hands together, making Fiona jump, and Marshall sink lower beneath the bubbles than before. Fiona stood after rinsing the shampoo from his hair and walked from the room, and I watched as Marshall hit the latch with his foot, draining the water and slowly pulling himself up. Once I had him out of the tub and sitting on the edge with a towel, he pinned me with a glare. This never happened. I knew exactly what he was saying. No idea what you're talking about, dude. Knowing he had himself handled, I left the room, letting him get dressed, waiting just outside the door. Fiona's beyond lucky I like her, and Marshall's lucky we're bros, or I so would not have done this. Sad eyes and my endless pity get me roped into a whole bunch of crap I just don't have time for. It was a hot summer day, the kind that called for ice cream. Who could resist that urge? I walk up to the counter to the ice cream stand near my house, and I'm waiting for what feels like forever. I'm only the third person in line. The first is this little girl, and right behind her is this major hottie. But that's not what my mind's set on. I want ice cream. This kid is taking forever. I want to groan in annoyance. I really do. But if the hottie is paying attention, I really don't want her to notice that I'm getting annoyed over a 5 minute wait for a dairy treat. I want a chocolate fudge swirl with rainbow sprinkles. Thank glob she's finally decided. Praise him. I'm not even paying attention to the hottie now. She's already ordered a simple vanilla cone, and my delicious treat is up for grabs. What can I get for you today? Wow, even the ice cream chick is cute. Is this the season of hotties, or am I just getting desperate? Just as I opened my mouth to answer, I heard a gasp, and caught notice of the chocolate ice cream kid crying on the bench, holding her cone with ice cream on the with her ice cream on the ground inside. Give me a chocolate fudge swirl with rainbow sprinkles and a cup with a cone on the side. The ice cream girl happily complies, and I pay for the treat with the last $5 I have, and walking over I stopped in front of the crying girl. Here, sorry yours fell. She just accepted the ice cream with a big smile and another sigh. With another sigh, I buried my hands in my pockets and trudged home. It was pouring, talk about autumn showers, but for once in my life I had an umbrella. Oh, this umbrella was a miracle umbrella, so very sturdy and water repellent. Okay, it was just an umbrella, but it was practically monsooning out there. I'm on my way home from work. It's a Saturday night and it's late and it's raining. Definitely not in the ideal weather situation. My job was only a block away from several clubs in the downtown area, so it wasn't unusual to see people walking home after having a few too many, or even just walking home. The rain was pouring, and my truck was in the shop for the next 2 days. As I'm walking along, I see this chick using her purse as an umbrella. Hell, she should just accept the inevitable that she's gonna get soaked. Now I can hear her moaning and groaning about the rain as I continue along the path. Finally, the bus stop is in view, and I watch as the girl runs under it for some cover before sitting on the bench and putting her head in her hands. Closing the umbrella, I shake it out and wait for the bus until finally it pulls up. I'm quick to find my bus fare. All I want to do is get home and sleep. I step on and notice that she hasn't moved from her spot. Hold on a sec. The bus driver nods as I lean out the door. Aren't you getting on? I ask, watching as she looks up. She's been crying. No, thank you though. I just wanted to get out of the rain for a few. I was hoping it would lighten up. Kid, we gotta go. I have a schedule to keep, the driver said. Just give me a second. Just one? Hurry up. I hop off the bus, handing her my umbrella. Now you can go home. It's supposed to be like this for the next few days, I said with a smile, climbing back on the bus and taking my seat. I can see the girl still staring at me as the bus pulls away, but at least she's smiling now. I hate the snow. Have I mentioned this? Snow and I do not mix well together. There's even the word no in snow, because even snow wants nothing to do with itself. I didn't feel like finishing school today. I had a study after lunch, and that was it. What's the point of sitting in a room waiting for class time for 45 minutes, doing nothing, when I could just go home? After scoffing my food and bidding the guys my goodbyes, I split halfway through lunch. It was snowing and sleeting, and everything was beyond icy as I walked back to my house. I couldn't help but notice the old lady ahead of me with both arms full of groceries. She's got some good balance. I've almost biffed twice now. She was moving slowly, and despite that, I watched in complete panic when her feet flew out from under her. It's a good thing I'm a fast walker, because at this point, I was only a few steps behind her. Speeding up, I caught her before she could fall. You okay, Miss Nana? It was the only thing I could think of to call her, and I honestly don't know if she was insulted by it or not. Oh, thank you, young man. You're such a sweet boy, she gushed as I held her up, being sure she had her footing. Do you need help? I'm heading that way, I said, pointing up the street. I would love some, thank you, she said with a smile, as I took her grocery bags in one arm, and the other arm was being used by the old woman as a support grip. Oh, you have such strong arms, she said, giving the one she was holding a squeeze as I blushed. I can't believe I'm getting hit on by someone's Nana. I can't help but play along. I try to stay in shape, just in case I have any lovely young ladies such as yourself in need of help. She laughed now, playfully patting my arm. Oh, you naughty thing, you! We went back and forth for quite a while, and eventually the turn for my street came up. I didn't say a word and continued following the old woman's lead. She had me enjoying myself quite a bit, and it's not like it was a chore to walk her home. But how far did she live? Finally, only 2 streets after mine, we turned, and her house was the third on the right. The stairs were covered in hardened, icy snow, and I could see the barely melted patches from the rock salt she'd used. Obviously, she couldn't lift the heavy snow. I helped her up the stairs and waved as she entered her house. I was going to leave, but spotting what looked to be a gardening shovel buried in the snow, I grabbed it, clearing our stairs and walkway. There was a bucket of rock salt, and I used a good majority of it, making sure the ice wouldn't return with a vengeance. Once done, I walked home. I'd still made it home earlier than if I'd stayed at school, so to me that was a win in my book. Emma punches my shoulder and shaking my head. I look at her in confusion. It wasn't a hard hit, so I know she's not mad at me. Lost in your thoughts, Ig? She asked in concern. Yeah. Why does everyone keep looking at me like that? We'll go get breakfast. You've been standing there in space for the last 10 minutes, she said, nudging me towards the kitchen. Fiona and Marshall were already finishing up their eggs and bacon. Grabbing my own plate, I began eating quickly, clearing my plate, barely tasting the food. I still wanted to see if Mo was going to the same gym. Grabbing my phone, I sent him a quick text, almost immediately receiving a confirmation from him. He was actually on his way there asking if I wanted to come along. Of course I'm going to go. Why else would I ask? Responding with a quick there in 5, I put my dishes in the sink and dig through my bag for a tank top and sweats before heading out the door. I'll be back later, I call out. Where are you going? Fiona asked, peeking her head around the corner. I'm meeting up with Mo for some boxing time. She nodded with a smile. Have fun, the blonde chirped. Shaking my head, I walked from the house and walked to the gym. It wasn't far from Marshall's place, and honestly, I could use the walk. Hey guys, does FP seem a bit off to anyone else? Fiona asked, walking back into the living room and sitting next to Marshall on the couch as Ember lounged on the love seat. I wouldn't be surprised if he was. With what happened last night, he should be off. I'd be more concerned if he wasn't, Ember said, turning to face Fiona. I've been meaning to ask you, FP said that you guys needed a place to be for a few days, so I just assumed you'd gotten into a fight with your parents. What happened? Hearing this, Marshall focused on the conversation. My parents threw him out, so I left with him. We're looking for a place currently. Well, I am. It'll be easier if I do the looking, she said simply. You're kidding me. Not in the slightest. That's why he was all bugged today, Spacey. Jumbled, brain-dead Iggy. That's who you'll see after a fight with our parents, Ember mumbled. He said he was going boxing with Mokro. That's good. He usually balances out after blowing some steam, Marshall said, knowing his friend well enough to be sure of this fact. So he'll be okay, right? We'll just have to wait and see, to be truthful. Now the redhead sighed. Something like this hasn't happened that I know of, so I don't know how he'll handle it. Sometimes Iggy can be really emotional, so working out his anger and hurt and frustration can only do him good. He'll be loads better when he gets back, Fee. FP always bounces back, Marshall said, reassuring the blonde as he rubbed her shoulder. You're sure? Of course I am. There will be a definite change in his mood. Just you wait and see. He was enjoying himself. It was plain to see by those around him. Lightning fast punches struck the punching bag as he moved with the motions of the bag. He was light on his feet and barely breaking a sweat. They had warmed up in every way Mo had wanted, and now was the part FP was looking forward to. The fighting aspect of boxing. His hands were already wrapped, and he was waiting rather impatiently for Moko to finish his own hand wraps. You're looking forward to this way too much, the Silver Street teen said, glowering at the redhead. Come on, man. Everyone loves a good fight. I know you do. Sorry. Ignitus couldn't help but feel excited. He and Moko had actually fought before, and he knew his friend could both take and throw a punch. Yeah, I do like a good fight. Just don't forget the rules. Nothing below the belt, no kicks or crap like that. Yeah, I know. I've been here more than enough times to know the rules, he said, walking towards the ring as Moko did the same. Good. Now get ready and don't get distracted because I won't go easy this time, he said with a smirk, intentionally irritating the redhead. Yeah, we'll see who's talking big in a few rounds, FP mumbled, raising his gloved hands up to tap his friends before they began throwing punches. This was what he loved, next to fire and music. He loved the thrill of fighting in any shape or form. He ducked and dodged, dipped and weaved, blocking a punch to the jaw, faking a left, and slamming his opponent hard with a right hook, catching Mo completely off guard. Backing up a bit, he gave his friend some breathing room, watching as he shook off the punch. Good to go? Yep. Several hours had passed since FP left, and deciding to do something fun, Marshall set up the video games, playing a few rounds, before letting the two girls annihilate each other. He was starting to feel sick again. Lying on the couch, he decided to take a break, resting his eyes smoking as he listened to their shouts of anger and frustration. I wonder when I'll stop feeling like crap, he thought to himself as his stomach lurched. Keeping his eyes closed, he breathed slowly. It wasn't nearly as bad as yesterday, but he still felt pretty bad. Winner! What's that, Ember? You can't be beaten? Funny there's a tally mark in your losses section, Fiona shouted triumphantly. Fiona, you won once out of 6 rounds. But you claimed to be unbeatable, and I won. Yeah, after I beat you 6 games in a row, the redhead said with a smirk as she shook her head. Play single player for a bit. I have to apartment hunt, she said, standing up and handing her the controller while Fiona switched games. Walking from the room, she checked her backpack, grabbing her phone, and found it had 7 missed calls, 22 texts, and 6 voicemails, all from her parents. Scowling, she flipped through the texts before deleting them all. She went to the voicemails, listening to each one and deleting them. Grabbing Fiona's laptop, she walked to the kitchen and began scanning apartment listings and ads in the online paper. She emailed several people about their properties, though there were very few that they could actually afford, though she was hoping they would be willing to negotiate. Suddenly her phone began ringing, and hoping it would be a potential landlord, she answered, not even checking the number. Hello? Oh, Ember, thank Glob, you finally answered. We've been so worried about you. Hearing this, she sighed. It was just her mother. Of course, we're fine, and I'm not coming back, so don't waste your breath. What would make you come home, baby? Just tell us and we'll do it. Ma, the only way I would ever come home is for you and Dad to stop treating my brother like crap. Give him a place to stay, let him keep his money. He has a legitimate job. He's not some hood rat like you guys seem to enjoy thinking he is. Until I'm positive you won't treat him like you have been, I refuse to ever step foot in that house again. Fine, we'll do it, she said quickly as Ember sighed. I can tell when you're lying, she said, hanging up and putting the phone back down as she returned to her apartment hunt. After an hour of looking and sending emails, the sound of the door opening caught her attention, and she watched as her brother walked into the room. Have fun? Always do. You know I love a good fight, Ignitus said with a grin. Ember smiled. Iggy's improvement in mood was beyond obvious, and although he had a bruise on his cheek, he seemed to be back to his normally happy self. Yeah, I do know that. Maybe you should get your own membership at the gym, she asked, watching as her twin laughed. When Mo pays, I can get in for free. Why would I waste my money? He asked, digging through his duffel bag and pulling out clean clothes. I'm gonna take a shower. I've worked today, he said, walking from the room. Fiona was still engrossed in the video games by the time Marshall had woken from his nap, though what had woken him was not the sound of video games, but the sound of knocking on the door of his house. He woke watching as Fiona exited the room and opened the front door. Oh, thank glob you're decent. After what happened with Jake, I had to come down here and be sure nothing was happening, Ellen said, hugging Fiona tightly as the blonde girl stood in confusion. Hey, Fio! Good. Looking over, she spotted Finn, and behind him was Jake, who was holding hands with a very pretty Asian-looking girl with colorful highlights streaked through her blonde hair. Hey, release my lover! Marshall shouted, though he looked sick enough that any enthusiasm and intent to freak his girlfriend's mom out was wasted. Instead, she smiled at him, and after releasing Fiona, walked over, giving him a hug. So, not that I'm not excited to see you all, because I am, but what's going on? You said something about Jake? Fiona asked, now looking to her oldest adopted brother. Fiona, this is my fiance, lady. Hearing this, Fiona squealed in excitement. Oh my glob, it's so nice to meet you, she said, hugging the rainbow hair girl enthusiastically before hugging her brother. Congratulations to you both. Yeah, that's not the biggest news, Finn said with a laugh as Jake elbowed him. Finn, that's not funny at all. This is going to affect Jake and Lady for the rest of their lives. This is no joke. Hearing this, Fiona was startled. What's going on? Now even Marshall was paying attention as Jake looked around nervously. Well, you're gonna be an aunt because me and Lady are having a baby. The room was silent as they all stared in shock. Then suddenly FP entered the room dressed for work and looked around. What did I miss? Oh my gosh. This is amazing. I love this book so much. Well, alright, she's gonna be an aunt. I'll be right back with another chapter. Hey, I'm back, and I can hear Mocha's cute little nibbling noises coming from the cage. He's munching on some food right now. I give them like their oxbow every single day. I made sure it's supposed to be an unlimited supply, and I was kind of worried about that because like I didn't, I don't want to feed them. I don't want to just have food always available for them because I didn't know if they would just eat more than they could handle and then get fat. But a lot of people said they don't, so I just gave them unlimited supply of oxbow, and so far it's been fine, and they just eat when they're hungry, and then they stop when they're not hungry, so anyway, I just, that was a way longer break than I expected. It was actually like 40 minutes, so now it's almost noon, and I ended up going to the bathroom and stuff, so yeah, I kind of needed that break, but it was really annoying. And so now it's almost noon, so I only have like 4 hours left. But anyway, I'm gonna try. So I think we're just gonna be doing a guardian angel for today, and then that's gonna be it. So I'm gonna just go to the next chapter. Hopefully, this is what will work. Alright. So, um, so Jake is having a child with his girlfriend. Hang on, sorry. Sorry. Hmm. Hang on. There's something that I forgot to do. Alright, let's read the next chapter. I'm ready. Chapter 32, The Depth and Fear of Love. How in the world did this happen? Fiona said in shock. Well, you know, Fee, when two people are in love, Marshall said, getting cut off as Ellen smacked his arm. Shush, you! I already made us shirts, Finn said, handing Fiona a blue long-sleeved shirt matching his, and only then did she notice what it said, Uncle Finn, only the end was purposely backwards. Opening hers, Fiona laughed. Hers said Auntie Fiona, and like his, all of the ends were backwards. Laughing, the blonde put it on. Together they congregated into the living room where Marshall was, and after talking about how they met and how they found out about their new addition, Finn decided that they needed to celebrate in some way. Ellen suggested a baby shower and immediately began planning it. After more than an hour later, much catching up between the three siblings occurring in said hour, Jake and Lady decided to leave. They still had to tell her family and decided that the call taking place in the privacy of their home would be best. Fiona hugged her brother hard and her soon-to-be sister-in-law as well. Lady seemed really cool. Her voice was croaky sounding due to her cold, but other than that, Fiona didn't think Jake could find anybody more suited for him. Later that night, Fiona lay in the bed next to a sleeping Marshall. She'd woken up and couldn't go back to sleep. That had been happening a lot lately. It was always the same dream, and it woke her up, leaving her a shaking, sweaty mess. The weird thing was, it technically wouldn't count as a nightmare. It wasn't even scary. The blonde wasn't even sure how long she'd been awake for, but it felt like hours. Finn and Ellen were downstairs. Ember was asleep already, and FP had come home as well. The entire house was silent. Eventually, the bed shifted as Marshall's arm wrapped around her, pulling her close. What's wrong? He asked softly. He'd just woken himself, and seeing the blonde awake, especially so late, was unusual. Nothing. I just can't sleep. Bad dreams and too many thoughts in my head, she said softly. What are you thinking about? Marshall said. Marshall asked, turning on his side to face the blonde. She was quiet for a long time. It's nothing important, she said softly. Don't worry about it. Marshall gave the blonde a look he was sure she couldn't really see in the dark. Fiona, if it's bothering you enough that you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about it, then it's obviously something important. He felt Fiona shrug. Suddenly an idea came to him, and with a smirk, he rolled on top of her and started kissing her. Reaching over, he flicked on the small night lamp as he continued. The lamp was bright enough for him to see the blonde below him, but not bright enough to light the room and wake the others downstairs. Fiona's face was flushed pink, and she made a little gasping sound as he kissed his way down her throat. Marcia could feel her skin heating up as she got flustered. Marsh, I, she stammered nervously, not quite sure how to deal with the very sudden dose of intimate affection he was pouring on her at the moment. My mother's downstairs, she said in a hushed voice, pushing herself upright, though much to her surprise. Marshall, too, sat up, pulling her with him, so she straddled his leg as he held her tightly against him. Marshall smirked as her cheeks darkened to a deep red. Now he spoke. I'm really into this, but if you want to do something else, like, oh, I don't know, maybe talk about what's bugging you, I guess we could. Before what? I, I guess we could. I keep dreaming about before, she said quickly as Marshall lay her back on the bed and flopped down beside her. Before what? He asked softly. Like, about your old. No, not about him, before even that. Well, sometimes that, but mostly it's before, Fiona whispered, easing Marshall's thoughts about potential nightmares in the form of one Mike Sartoris, occupation current jailbird, and pedophilic former foster father. Back before I met you, I was different. I was always I was off the wall, always in trouble, causing mayhem. I got into tons of fights too. You're 9 years old, Fiona. You know how to act like a young lady, Mother Superior said, scolding the girl, who was struggling to pull herself free from the nun's grip. There's no point in acting like a lady if I'm not treated like one, the blonde snapped, yanking her arm hard while she dug her heels into the dirt. That's not the point, you brat. Now Fiona was yanked hard, making her stumble as she was brought into the house. Currently, she was in what they liked to call a group home. It was a fancy name for orphanage, and the girl knew that. The point is, we feed you, clothe you, and all you do is cause problems and fight. He started it, Fiona protested, as the woman stuck the blonde in the corner of the kitchen. Looking down, she spotted the grains of rice in the can and knew what was coming. It doesn't matter who started it. You gave him a bloody nose. Taking the can of raw rice, she poured it on the ground in the corner. You earned this punishment. Now kneel and stare at the ceiling. Pray to Glob to absolve you of your sins, she said, turning to start her dishes. Fiona glowered at the ground, and storming over, she kicked the older woman hard before returning back to the corner, kneeling on the grains and looking at the ceiling, feeling the glare of her caretaker's eyes on her. Turning her head and making eye contact, Fiona smirked. Now I earned it. You're going to be there twice as long. Don't care, I earned it, Fiona said, turning back to the ceiling, taking the punishment. It had been 12:47 when she'd started it, and still she continued to kneel, staring up at the ceiling. Her neck was cramped and sore, but more than that, did her knees hurt. Each grain of rice that dug into her skin felt like glass stabbing into it, and regardless of how often one shifted position, it only continued to hurt. Finally, after a good portion of forever, the older woman returned. Stand up! Fiona stood, brushing the grains off her knees and turned, giving the woman a deadpan look. Have you anything to say for yourself? She asked as Fiona glanced at the clock. It was 3:20. She'd broken her previous record by 33 minutes. Yeah, address me properly, Fiona. Resisting a scowl, Fiona curtsied, oozing sarcasm as she spoke. Oh, Mother Superior, I apologize for my behavior. It's not fitting for a young lady to fight, she bit out with a smile. Go to your room. No playing, no dinner, no bath, and you are not allowed to attend the hand-in-hand adoption event. Yes, ma'am. Turning, Fiona walked from the kitchen, making her way back to the room that she shared with at least 12 other girls. The punishment she could take. She'd gone without dinner more than once, and to be honest, she hated bath time anyways, but taking away hands in hands? That was just cruel. It was the 3-day weekend event where you paraded around being as good as possible, hoping that maybe someone would adopt you. It only happened once a month. Fiona had made it up the stairs and climbed into her bunk. Bunk beds, it seemed like nuns, were big on saving space. It was surprising they hadn't tried stacking them on top of each other yet. There were 6 bunk beds in each room and around 27 kids or so. She lay on the bunk listening as the kids played in the halls and the rooms, screaming, running, and laughing. Closing her eyes, she ignored them and had eventually fallen asleep, waking to the sound of one of the younger nuns that they were to call sisters, rousing them for breakfast. This time it was Sister Lucy. "Good morning, girls. Today is a bright new day. Make your beds, then line up for the restrooms. Breakfast will be served in 15 minutes," she choked, opening the curtains. They never thought how difficult making the top of a bunk bed was when they bought them. Fiona fluffed her pillow and started from the bottom, pulling her blanket up to the top as she descended the ladder of her bunk. She released the sheet, checking and pleased with her results. Once she lined up for the bathroom, her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she'd been barred from dinner the previous evening. "Fiona, once you've brushed your teeth and are properly groomed, you're to report to Mother Superior in her office." Fiona nodded, finally entering the bathroom and brushing her teeth. 6 were missing and 3 were coming in. Returning back to her room, Fiona placed her toothbrush back in the bag and pulled out her brush for her long blonde hair, raking through the knots and staring intrigued at a dead ant that had apparently been in her hair since yesterday. "Cool," she said with a laugh, and once she was in the group uniform, which consisted of a black skirt and tights with a gray shirt, Fiona made her way down the hall, knocking on the door. "Come in. Lucy said you will speak properly, Fiona." Now she did sigh out loud. "Sister Lucy said you wanted to see me, Mother Superior." "Correct, Fiona. Sit." Looking around the office, Fiona sat in the chair in front of the desk, staring at the woman before her. "Your punishment still stands about hands to hands. You're not allowed to attend. I expect you to be in my office directly before lunch when the visitors arrive." "Yes, Mother Superior." "I also expect you to be on your best behavior, Fiona. If I have one more incident with you, I will be calling your caseworker and have you sent away." "Yes, Mother Superior," Fiona said boredly. "I'm serious, Fiona. One more fight, one more mess up, and you're gone. Now repeat to me what I told you, and I swear if you get this wrong, there will be no breakfast either." Be in your office after lunch?" The look on her face was enough for Fiona to know that she wouldn't be getting breakfast today either. "Go outside, return before lunch, behave." "Yes, ma'am." "You may leave." Standing, Fiona walked out of the room, her belly growling loudly as she passed the kitchen, the smell of scrambled eggs and bacon beckoning her. Reluctantly, she walked past the room, knowing that Mother Superior was behind her. Fiona headed outside and ran up the hill in the back of the house. The yard was huge and fenced in. It was practically a farm for children. At the top of the hill, she could look out over the land. There were swing sets, clubhouses, trees to climb. This place wasn't half bad if people would just leave her be. Running down the hill, Fiona headed towards the boys' clubhouses, knowing that Bryce, one of the older boys, always had a snack hidden away somewhere inside of them. She dug around through the toy trucks and cars and found a small brown bag filled with goodies. Crumpling it shut, she ran towards the tree, climbing up the branches and feasting on the sugary treats. It seemed that she'd found a special stash of nutty bars, fudge rounds, and gummy bears. Fiona didn't care. She ate it all, stuffing the bag into the hollow of the tree. She wiped her mouth clean and brushed herself free of crumbs before descending. Already she could see the group of kids running towards the play area, and almost instantly she spotted Thomas, the boy she'd punched yesterday, and aimed to avoid him. If Mother S was serious about not letting her have breakfast, maybe she was serious about sending her away too. Already Oh. Sitting on the swings, Fiona kicked her feet out easily, making it move as she began to swing back and forth. Closing her eyes, she enjoyed the ride until one side of her swing jerked to a stop, flinging her from the swing. She landed hard on the ground, seething, and turned, spotting Thomas, who was laughing with several boys next to him. She gritted her teeth and clenched her tiny fists, glaring at him and struggling with every fiber of her being to not wail him into the ground. Turning around, she stomped away, listening as the group began following her. "Aw, is crybaby Fiona gonna go cry?" "Yes, freaky Fiona gonna go cry?" another of them teased as she continued to death glare at the ground, clenching her fists. Suddenly her head pulled back as she felt a sharp pain, making the blonde yelp. Seeing her hair in the boy's hand, Fiona saw nothing but red, and turning, she tackled him to the ground, punching his face, neck, and chest, and any other part she could reach. Angrily, Thomas pushed her off, yanking at her hair once again before he began throwing punches of his own. He was heavier than her by far, and Fiona didn't care. Grabbing a handful of his own short hair, she yanked hard, ripping it from his head, and with the other hand she threw dirt in his face before scrambling to her feet and kicking him hard again and again until he curled up into himself, huddling like a ball. She knew that Mother Superior wouldn't keep her after this. It didn't matter that she hadn't started the fight. She'd still fought. Storming back to the house, Fiona ducked behind a tree, watching as one of the children led the mother and several sisters to where the fight was. Once they had passed, Fiona hurried back to the house and went on a rampage. Toys were thrown everywhere, chairs kicked, faces smashed, dishes shattered. The destruction continued upstairs. Picking up one of the baseballs, she flung it at the window in the boys' room, shattering it. Like the girls did, each boy had a bag with their own personal products in them, with their own personal hygiene products in them. Those went out the window too. Those went out the window too. Next was the sister's room where they bunked down at night. She tore books to shreds, flung clothes everywhere, making sure to get most of them in the fireplace. It had been lit recently, and had yet to be cleaned of all the sooty ash. Grabbing one of the sister's shoes, she walked to the bathroom, flinging it at the mirror and shattering it, and ripping the shower curtain to shreds. Fiona walked from the room to her room, leaving nothing but destruction in her wake. Grabbing her bag, she brushed her hair and walked from the room, flinging the brush at another window, shattering that one as well, before walking into Mother Superior's office and sitting on the chair in front of the desk just waiting to be found. The boy was in terrible shape, and no doubt the little wretch had gone into hiding to avoid punishment. Mother Superior and the sisters marched back to the house, leading Thomas and the children in tow. It was just about lunchtime as well. Opening the door, the mother froze in complete horror. It was as if a tornado or some kind of wild animal had demolished the house. Spotting the china within her reach untouched, Mother Superior glowered. A wild animal or a wild child had done this, and she had a feeling she knew just who had done this. Walking through the house, she assessed the damage, growing more and more furious. She ascended the stairs, noticing the broken windows on the second floor. Every single room was trashed, and opening the door to her office, she expected to see the same, but instead she found Fiona sitting on the chair in front of her desk. "Did you do this?" she asked simply. "You were going to send me away because of Thomas. Now you have a real reason to get rid of me," the blonde said with silent anger, never taking her eyes off Mother Superior. She watched as she left the room, returning with a dustpan, dumping it into the corner. "Neil, no." They stared at each other for the longest time, before, for the first time, Mother gave in. Walking behind her desk, she opened a drawer, pulled out a file, and dialed a number. "Hello, I'm looking to speak with Lance Book. Oh, good. I'm calling in regards to one of your children, Fiona Mertens. I want her off this property and in state custody within the hour. She's caused thousands of dollars in physical damage to the group home and has been physically assaulting the other children. The girl's disturbed. Yes, we'll see you soon." With that, she hung up just in time to watch Fiona carelessly knock a vase off its stand. Mother S. didn't even respond. "Any belongings you have, go collect them. Now." Fiona only continued to stare before she turned and walked from the room. There was nothing she owned, and Mother knew that. Walking down the stairs, past the horrified stares of children and newly arriving guests, Fiona waltzed past them and sat down on the front steps in only her uniform, waiting for her worker to arrive. Lance was a nice guy, he always had been. He didn't say a thing. He just collected Fiona and drove off under Mother Superior's gaze. "Why did you do that, Fiona? You'd been there for 4 years. What in the world compelled you to do that?" he asked, looking back at the girl in the seat behind him. "She was going to send me away anyway, so I gave her a reason to do so," she said softly. "For such an angry young girl, I'm surprised you don't cry more." "I'll cry when I'm dead." The rest of the car ride had been driven in silence. She had been introduced to an old fat woman and dropped off at her house. It was the only foster home within availability that had been close to where Fiona had originally been. "Okay, girl, here's the rules. You do what I say when I say it. I ask you to jump, you ask how high. You get it?" she asked with her hands on her hips. Fiona stood in silence, just staring at her. "I said, do you get it? You understand me, girl?" Fiona just blinked at her before walking upstairs to the room shown to her, and Lance less than 10 minutes ago, and slamming the door shut. Less than an hour later, Lance was back. "She's rude and disrespectful. She slams doors and is ignorant to authority," the old woman shouted. Lance now looked annoyed to be back, especially so soon. "Fiona, what do you have to say for yourself?" he asked, looking at the girl incredulously. "Her rule stated that I had to do as she was told, what I was told. She never told me to answer her questions, so I didn't," she said, simply turning and walking from the house and climbing into the car, leaving the two adults behind her flabbergasted. The next house was in the neighboring county. Fiona had been there a week before getting into a fight at school and suspended for 10 days. In that time, she'd gotten into fights with the neighborhood children for various reasons. Fiona had been there for 3 months before the family had had enough. The house had the house after had 7 children already, all boys. Lance refused to drop her off there, and secretly Fiona was grateful. The sixth home in her foster kid career had only one other child, a small boy no more than 4 months old. He'd gotten pneumonia, and the family lost him 2 weeks after Fiona arrived. They said she could stay if she wanted to. Fiona chose to leave to give them time to grieve. The seventh she stayed for a year. By now she was 13. She'd grown close to a little girl in the neighborhood. Her name was Brittany Marie Olson. Brittany was always wearing a hat, and after the wind blew it off one day, Fiona learned why. The girl had no hair. Apparently she was sick. Her mother said it was leukemia. The next day, Fiona went to a hairdresser who worked with locks for princesses and had them cut her hair. Are you sure you want to cut it? The stylist asked, looking at the 2 feet of blonde locks. Yep, I want them to use my hair for a little girl in my neighborhood. She deserves it more than I want it. The stylist looked impressed. Okay, how much off do you want? Shave it. What? Make me bald. I'm not kidding. I want her to have as much as possible. You're sure? She asked, tying Fiona's hair back. Absolutely do it. She watched as the girl wavered with the clippers in her hand. Would you feel better if I did it? Actually, yeah, she said, handing the blonde the buzz cutters, watching as Fiona turned them off and carefully began shearing her hair away until she could no longer reach. Care to do the rest? She asked, offering the shears back to the stylist, who continued on with the shaving of her head. From root to tip there had been almost 3 feet of hair. So when will that wig be done? With this they can make more than one, you know. What if we cut it and we can have a short one and a long one? Hearing this, Fiona grinned. Yes, do it! It'll be ready in about 2 weeks, maybe 3. Awesome! Fiona said brightly, accepting the tickets for the wigs she was going to receive. Just as she was about to leave, the stylist chased after her. Hold on, she said, finally catching up to her. Here, take this. It's silly, but it'll keep your head warm. Handing Fiona a bundle of white, the girl folded it open and laughed at the sight of the bunny hat. It's awesome, thanks, she said, immediately putting it on and tugging at the ears with a smile. With a wave, she walked off. A month later, the wigs were ready. Brittany Marie Olson was ecstatic and loved both of them. 2 weeks later, she passed away with a head full of blonde hair. A week after that, Fiona was expelled for physically assaulting a student, using her locker to do so. The girl needed 14 stitches and lost a tooth. Again, Fiona was sent away. The eighth and ninth homes were in the same small town in the middle of nowhere. There she could get into trouble with other people because they were friendly small town folk, according to Lance. Of course she'd gotten into trouble. The friends of her foster sibling had been messing with her, and after having had enough of dealing with him on her 14th birthday of all days, she slammed his hand shut in the door, breaking his finger. Naturally, her foster parents didn't want to deal with such a violent child, and the next day Lance arrived and brought her to the ninth house. Fiona didn't say or do anything there. She just existed through the last month of the school year and all of the summer, not even speaking to the residents of the house, and barely leaving her room. Lance had even come to visit her to see what could be done to motivate the girl into interacting with the family. She didn't even speak to him. In an attempt to get the girl to open up, they got her a kitten, told her to get good grades and do chores around the house, and that would earn food and litter for the cat. Fiona agreed. That resulted in a recluse teenager with a pet cat, who only occasionally got into fights. It went down from once a week to twice a month. After several months, they couldn't deal with it any longer, and neither could Fiona, and with her best interests in mind, they asked Lance to come get her. Fiona, what did you do this time? He asked in exasperation, watching as she stroked the cat's fur as it rested in her lap. Nothing. I didn't do a single thing, she said simply. I think we need to start fresh with you, Fiona. How would you feel about moving to another state? He asked seriously. The silence in the car was thick, and finally the blonde sighed. It's not like I have anyone anyways. Why not Lancelot? Don't call me that. Oh, come on, you're a dark knight of olden times. The man simply sighed, shaking his head, trying not to show his amusement. Well, I'm being relocated to the other side of the country. Would you like to be placed out there, or would you like another worker? Again, there was silence in the car. Lance, how long did we spend together? We didn't just get this awesome social worker screwed up child bond out of the blue. You're stuck with me, dude. Now he did laugh. You are something else, Fiona. Why is it that you haven't been adopted? Physically violent, short temper, unladylike, destructive, probably crazy. The list goes on. Besides, you already know this, she said, as Kate continued to purr in her lap. Fiona, you're a good kid when you want to be. You're a sweet girl when you want to be. It's your temper that's going to get you in trouble. You barely think before acting, and that's your downfall. Making friends for you is hard because you either refuse to open up or because you scare everybody away. What are you going to do when you find somebody you actually like? How will they handle you going off the deep end, trashing the place, and watching you physically beat somebody into a bloody pulp? I'm a tough guy, Fiona, but sometimes you even scare the hell out of me. It's okay to get frustrated and it's okay to get angry, but the physical violence needs to stop. You can't punch every person for a snide remark. You can't bash everyone's face in because you don't like them. I hope it doesn't happen, but someday there might be somebody bigger and stronger than you. What will you do then? He asked worriedly. The only people bigger and stronger than me are adults, and I'm not stupid enough to get into a fist fight with one of my foster parents, Lance. She watched his reaction in the mirror, nodding his head as if he'd agreed with her. That's not the point. The point is, you have to control your anger and frustration before you scare everyone away from you. What if you end up liking somebody, then you scare them away and you're left as an old woman with her cat? You have to start controlling yourself. You're 14 years old. I'll be 15 in a few months. Fine, but that's even more of a reason as to why you have to get a hold of your emotions and reactions to things. You're becoming a young woman now, Fiona, and I'm not going to go all mother superior on you and say you have to act like a young lady, but you do have to assess your level of maturity, he said firmly, leaving Fiona to think in the back seat as they continued to drive. The 10th place was a group home for teenagers, and after one of the girls had intentionally kicked Cake, Fiona went ballistic and Lance was called. She'd been there less than a month. Place number 11 was a small house. It was quiet, and the foster parents were kind. She stayed for just over a year, until the foster father lost his job, and after struggling for those final months, their house went into foreclosure and they had to move. The place was in a two-bedroom apartment, and knowing they weren't in proper condition to provide and care for a child and her pet, Lance was called again. Finally, foster home number 12 came up, right after her 16th birthday. Okay, Fiona, I know you have the worst luck ever and you aren't a people person and you're a little aggressive, but please try to behave. This is the only place near enough that could take you on such short notice, and the school isn't the best one, but it's the only one in the area that had room for enrollment. There's talk from local foster parents about there being some kid there with a bad history of fighting. Please just don't try to fight with this boy on purpose, Fiona. Try to keep your head, close your eyes, count to 3, do something, please. Seeing the worried look on his face, Fiona sighed. Fine, I'll try to be good. I'll try not to get into a fight, and I'll try not to piss off my foster parents. Good, he said as they drove up a street, and turning the corner, finally he stopped in front of a white house. I've talked to them earlier, so they should So they both should be expecting you, he said, parking the vehicle and stepping out with Fiona in tow as she carried her cat. She watched as he rang the doorbell, and a small mousy woman with brown hair answered. Hello, you must be Mr. Burke, and this must be Fiona. I'm Karen. It's nice to meet you, sweetie, she said, closing the door behind them watching as Fiona looked around, her green backpack on her shoulders and her cat in her arms. Shall we visit her room, ma'am? Lance asked, watching as she nodded with a smile and led the way down the hallway. The bedroom was small in size with baby blue walls, and showing Fiona the closet, the woman left her in the room. Placing Cake on the mattress, Fiona shuffled her bag off her shoulders. Turning, she went to hang it on the knob of her closet door, and jumped at the sight of her foster father in the doorway. He stared at her for the longest time, and Fiona watched him as he watched her. I was hoping they'd send us a girl, he said, the words sending a shiver down her back. Now Karen has someone other than me to spend time with. Fiona blinked, hearing this. Maybe that shiver was unwarranted. My name is Mike. If you need me for any reason, let me know. It would be my pleasure, he said, walking away from the room. Fiona listened, still not having moved, as footsteps came closer to her room. It was Lance. Come on, house tour, he said, motioning for her to follow. It was the unusual ritual they did. He brought her through the house, showing her where everything was, introduced her formally to her foster parents, answered any questions they had for him, and after telling her to behave, he left. The first week she was there, Fiona didn't go to school. She'd arrived on spring break and halfway through the year. The second week she'd stayed quiet and to herself, and that Friday she'd gotten into a fight with this girl with dyed green hair named Patty Huntress, and ended up with detention. It was there she began hearing the rumors about the Vampire King. Leaning back, Fiona scoffed as the kids talked about him, how he fought like a beast from hell, how he never lost a fight, and how looking into his angry eyes was a death sentence in itself, because if you rubbed him the wrong way, he ended you. It was BS. It had to be. But then again, one doesn't just pick up a badass reputation out of the blue. It had been another week until she first laid eyes on him. He was a retreating figure leaving the school grounds along with several other boys. The only way Fiona knew who he was because of how wide a berth the crowd gave him. She still hadn't made any friends. Deciding she would take Lance's advice, Fiona started anew at the beginning of the week. It didn't go as planned. The next week brought more than just a glimpse of the Vampire King, though. Having missed breakfast that morning, Fiona grabbed a plate from the shelf, turning to glare as she felt a tug of resistance. She actually had to crane her neck back to glare at him. He was tall, much taller than she thought he'd be. Narrowing her eyes, she continued to glare. Dude, give me the donut. Fiona watched as surprise visibly splayed across his face. Was he always used to getting his way? Ha! Well, not with her. Like hell I will. It's mine, he said, now trying to snatch the donuts plate from her grip. She was not giving this up, and like a champ, Fiona held her side. I was here first. Okay, keep calm. Count to 3. Oh, Lance, I'll be seeing you soon. Like I'm supposed to care? Don't you know who I am? I'm Marshall Lee. Okay, he'll approve of violence with words and not fists. Well, Marsh, am I supposed to care? Stupid, stupid, stupid boy. I swear to Glob. Fiona watched as he snatched the donut and licked it, dropping it on the plate. Was that supposed to gross her out? Ha! Step up your game. You want to eat it now? He asked with a smirk, confidence in his voice as if he'd won. As if, grabbing the donut, Fiona took a bite and chucked it across the cafeteria. Just did. Now neither of us can have it, she snapped, giving the cashier her only dollar before storming off and leaving the boy behind her in shock. Dude, you threw my donut, he called after her. I paid for it, so technically it's my donut, she said, making her way to an empty section of tables and chairs, claiming a table for herself. She hadn't known he'd been following her until he sat across from her. Now Fiona scowled and gritted her teeth. This kid was really testing her. I wonder if I really will get suspended over a donut. What the hell could he possibly want now? What, are you gonna lick the table too? She growled, and instead of the argument she'd expected, Fiona was met with an amused grin. You are awesome. This came as a surprise. Nobody had ever said that, especially after almost getting into a fight with her. What? She asked in utter confusion. This just hadn't happened before. Ever. All these dopes are scared to death of me. It's nice to find someone who actually stands up to me. It's refreshing, he said, kicking his feet up on the chair near her, smiling wolfishly. Yeah, all your happy refreshingness aside, I still wasted the last of my money on a donut I couldn't even enjoy, Fiona said, glaring at the table now, intending to ignore the boy before her. She listened as the chair scraped and as he walked away. Good, I don't need. Suddenly, the sound of a tray clattering startled her as she shifted her focus to the tray, then back to Marshall. She watched as he leaned across the table, grabbing the apple, and bit into it with a loud crunch. Even with a mouthful of apple, he grinned at her. There, food. You happy now? Fiona glared at him, trying hard not to smile at the stupid grin on his stupid face. Now he began pushing it towards her, nudging it closer and closer, trying to entice her with the food. Come on, take it. Take it, you know you want it, he said in a sing-song voice, wiggling it. Unable to hold back, Fiona smiled, laughing a bit, as she looked away from him, reaching over and dragging the plate to her. Thank you. No problem, Blondie. What's your name anyways? He asked, leaning back and taking another bite of his apple. Fiona, she said simply, taking a bite of the pancakes and reveling in the taste of food as her stomach growled appreciatively. Cool name, so where you from? I don't really know. I move around a lot. That's right, keep it simple, Fiona. What, busy parents or something? Hearing these words, Fiona paused, looking down in disappointment. I don't have parents. I don't even know what happened to them. Technically, I'm a ward of the state, the blonde said, air quoting. I'm sorry, that sucks. He actually sounded like he felt bad, not one of those awkward, oh, sorry, let me pity you voices. It does. All I really have is my cat Cake. Well, if you want, you could emancipate yourself and settle somewhere, he suggested, as Fiona shrugged. I always hoped when I was a kid that someone out there would want me, you know? I've always wanted to be part of a family, she said softly, wondering why spilling her guts to a stranger felt so nice. They had been quiet for the longest time before Marshall spoke up. Well, if you want, you can be part of my family, he said, much to Fiona's surprise. What? We can be friends, he said simply. I I never usually stay in one place for long. The longest was a year. They just keep bouncing me around. You don't have to see each other every day to be friends. You just have to remember each other and the promise to be friends. I'll be your friend for as long as you're here, and I'll be your friend if you ever leave, okay? Fiona blinked in shock. It was only her first real day in school with her let's attempt to not physically beat someone mindset here, and already she was hearing something like this. And more than that, she was hearing this from the guy who only 10 minutes or so ago she was fighting with over a donut. What the hell? Okay, her voice was tentative. I'd like to be friends. Cool, I'll see you around, Fee. The bell's gonna ring soon, he said, and watching Marshall stand and walk from the room. Fiona just sat there. Maybe Lance had a point about self-control and not trying to kill people, because the first day she put it into practice, she'd made a friend. Fiona wasn't sure what kind of friend, but she had made one. Picking up the tray, she was about to dump the trash when she noticed something written on a napkin. That slick bastard thinks I'll call him, she thought, grabbing the napkin from the tray and jamming it into her pocket. It was strange, because after the bell rang, she kept seeing Marshall constantly in the hallways, and when it seemed that she'd finally escaped him, the blonde sat down in the back of her music class, only to stare in shock as he came waltzing in, silencing the room, sitting in the seat behind hers. He nudged her chair, poked her with a pencil, and just when she wanted to kill him, the blonde took a breath and turned to face him. What? She whispered. Did you get my number? No, I just like sticking napkins in my pocket. It's a fetish of mine, she said, turning back around after watching him grin. Shaking her head, she focused on the teacher. The rest of the school day passed with gym being her final class, and much to her surprise, Marshall had gym too. It was basketball day, and he was having an easy time because he was tall. Gym ended, and Fiona took her time in the locker room, waiting for everyone to clear out before leaving. She'd seen a lot of Marshall today, and he was a bit suffocating in his ability to be ever present without intending to be, or was he? Shaking her head, she walked back to her foster house. After a long time of boredom, she decided to text him. That wasn't the full chapter. It's not done yet, but I have to eat because I'm super hungry, and if I wait any longer, then I'm gonna I don't know, but I need to eat is my point. So I gotta take a break and eat some food and make some food. And I'm gonna eat and I'll be back and I'll read the rest of the chapter. Sorry I couldn't finish it, but I will be back. Okay, let's finish this chapter. Give me a second. Bleh. I've changed so much, Marshall, and I've changed so much, Marshall, and I honestly still do fight with my temper, but I don't want to scare you away if I end up blowing up. Lance was right. I don't know how I deal with losing you because I am a freak, she said, closing her eyes and turning away from him as Marshall stared in shock. Fiona, you are not a freak. Babe, look at me, he asked softly as she continued staring at the wall. Having had enough, Marshall pulled the blonde over and lay on her, pinning her beneath him. You can ignore me now? I can try, she said with a small smile, one he'd grown to love. You're an amazing person, Fiona, and you could never ever scare me away. I promise I could watch you blow up and destroy the entire planet, but I swear to you, I could still find a reason to love you as much as I do, he said softly, brushing her bangs from her eyes. And you said as a kid that you would cry when you were dead? Fiona, I've seen you cry a lot, but you're still here, you're still alive. And I remember the first time I saw you cry. It was the first time I held you in my arms. And my glob, Fiona, I was afraid. You were crying your eyes out, and I could barely understand a thing you said to me. You just cried your heart out until you fell asleep. And the second time I saw you cry, it was just as bad. he said, still keeping her underneath him. Marshall wanted her entire attention, and if he had to sit on her to do so, he would. You looked so lost, Fee, just standing in my room with these huge watery eyes, and of all things on earth you wanted it was just to be held. That was the first time I kissed you, he whispered. And the third? She asked, still looking at him, watching as Marshall smiled a sad smile. That was when they were taking you away. You didn't want to leave. I knew how you felt because I felt the same way. Always feeling so alone, even if you were surrounded by people. And they were separating you from your only source of happiness, he said, closing his eyes and remembering the heartache from that day. The fourth barely counts, but you still cried. Barely, but you did. It was when I scared you at dinner on your birthday. I feel terrible about that. And the fifth time, Glob, Fiona, I'm surprised you didn't just stay crying, especially with what that bastard did to you. But in front of me after that, hell, you didn't shed a single tear. Instead, your dreams did the crying, so would that even count? The last time I saw you cry, despite everything happening now, was back at my prom when you were throwing up and sick. And I cry when I puke, so you and I both know that doesn't count. But in the time we've been to, so in the time we've been together, almost a year now, I've seen you cry, like actually cry, 5 real times. Were you dead those 5 times, Fiona? Not physically, because that's a stupidly obvious question to ask, but I mean emotionally. Were you actually at a point where you felt dead inside? Marshall asked, staring at Fiona, waiting for her answer. Opening her mouth, she spoke. The first three, yes, I did. It's hard to describe it, but there was nothing else I could do. I didn't know how to feel, or what was okay to feel. I was just so numb. I was numb and afraid it was just so much. Too much. I just imploded in on myself. And the last two, I was just scared. You scared me at the diner, and I forgave you. And I still forgive you because I know that wasn't your intention. And that day when he came back, Glob, all I wanted to do was hide. I didn't even think to call you, and I don't even know why. All of that could have been avoided if I'd called you or something. Fiona, he threatened to hurt you if you said anything. You were afraid. You can't blame yourself for that. Don't for a second even dare to blame yourself. It's in the past, he said softly, watching as now she turned her head away from him. Fiona studied the wall, listening to the silence as he continued to lay on her. She didn't know what to say or even how to accept what he was telling her, so instead she just pretended that the wall was far more intriguing. His eyes met hers as he tilted his head into a line of sight. Almost immediately she looked away from him. Fiona, do you love me? Now her eyes met his willingly. Of course I do. Then just listen to this one bit, okay? You can ignore the rest or slip off into La La Land if you want, but I need you to hear this and I need you to understand, okay? He asked, seriously watching as she turned her head to face him, waiting for him to speak. I know you hate to cry, and I know that sometimes you don't know how to handle things. I can see your fighter's instincts and responses, and I know when you're angry, half the time you want to pummel what upset you into the ground. It's not something you have to tell me, Fiona, because I see it. You're terrible at hiding. You could never frighten me away, not from you. I would rather hold you back from bashing somebody's head in than ever watch you cry, because you held too much in and grew numb and felt dead inside. I want to see tears of joy from you, not tears of heartache and fear. I love you, Fiona, and I want you to never have to question yourself around me, because you are my everything, okay? I want you to let out what you're feeling. I don't want you to hold it in. Knowing that you hold things in until you feel numb, Fiona, that hurts me more than you could ever possibly know, because that means I'm doing something wrong in our relationship. It means I'm not supporting you and taking care of you like I should be. And I swear to God, Fiona, I want to. I want to do these things for you. I want to take care of you, to show you that you deserve more love than you could possibly stand. And I want you to know that everything I want to do for you is not just out of love, but from the sole fact that I never ever want you to experience a single ounce of pain. Well, I have power to prevent it, okay? He said desperately now, holding her face in his hands, watching as her lip trembled. Reaching up, Fiona pulled him down, burying her face in his neck as she hugged him tightly. Thank you. I love you, thank you. Glob, Fiona, if you need to talk about something, tell me. I'm amazingly awesome, but I'm no psychic. I just didn't want to add more to your plate. You have more than enough to worry about already. I didn't want to add more. Fiona, don't you ever think like that again. If you're hurting and I don't notice, tell me, okay? Okay. And never ever say that something about you is unimportant, because to me, everything about you is important, Fiona. Don't you ever question that ever again. I won't. Do you need to talk more or about anything else? Because I'm here for you. I don't care what time, Fee. I'm right here. Shaking her head, Fiona continued holding on to him tightly, and turning over, Marshall flopped on his back, Fiona still clinging to him securely. She listened as his heart thrummed in his chest, just lying there. They both lay there, and eventually Marshall ran a hand through his hair, sighing in annoyance. He could tell that she was still thinking, because usually by now she would have melted against him, each arm wrapped around his torso, her legs intermingled with his, and she would sigh that little sigh she did each time, and nuzzle her face into his chest, but not this time. This time she held him stiffly, no nuzzling, no little sigh, she just lay there like a robot. God damn it, Fiona, tell me what's wrong. Again, like before, she simply shrugged. Fiona abruptly landed on the mattress after Marshall pushed himself up, climbing from the bed. Walking over, he peeked out the door before shutting it. Now he paced the dimly lit room. Tell me what's wrong, he said, stopping in his tracks to stare at her. I don't know, she said softly. And it only served to fuel Marshall's annoyance. Yes, you do. Something else is on your mind, Fiona. You're never like this. What is wrong? I don't. Now he ran both hands through his hair. Stop lying to me. For the love of Glob, just stop it. I know you enough to know when something's wrong. So why don't you just spit it out? Do you not want to do this anymore, Fiona? Do you not want to be with me anymore? Because if you don't, it'll kill me, but I'll let you go. I think I could do it if I thought that's what you wanted, isn't it? He asked, sounding heartbroken and holding out tears. Is that what you want, Fiona? No! She shouted in a panic, now quickly sitting up as she watched Marshall become even further unglued as he clenched his eyes tightly, holding back the torrent of tears he knew was there as his heart beat rapidly in his chest. Then what is it? Fiona opened her mouth to speak, but words wouldn't come. Fiona, what is it? Marshall could feel his heart pounding now as he started to get lightheaded and dizzy. He didn't care, even as the room started spinning. Leaning against the wall, Marshall slid down until he was sitting on the ground, with his head between his knees, feeling sick to his stomach as a sharp pain laced through his chest. He blinked, and it seemed that instantaneously Fiona was beside him, talking to him. But he couldn't hear a single word she'd said. She was patting his face and talking to him, and even so close he just couldn't hear anything but the pounding of his heart in his ears. Immediately the blonde ran from the room, though he had no idea why. It was strange. Even the color was fading as slowly he blacked out. He was upset and frustrated, and she didn't blame him, but she would rather see him annoyed than hurt by the question that plagued her. How, after knowing everything now, could he even love her? But when he'd leaned against the wall, his pale skin dramatically paler, that had startled Fiona. She scrambled from the bed, hurrying over to him as he slid to the ground. Marshall, Marshall, can you hear me? Marshall! Fiona was patting his cheeks and holding his head up and barely getting a response. Scrambling to her feet, Fiona raced to the door, ripping it open, her heart beating frantically. Mom! The group downstairs all woke at the sound of her frantic scream. Immediately, Ellen was hurrying over. What's wrong, Fiona? The same question Marshall had just been asking. How ironic. Something's wrong with Marshall, Fiona said in a panicked voice as she ran back into the room, her mother arriving only moments later. What happened? We were having an argument, the blonde said hysterically. I don't know what happened, but he got pale and just passed out. Help me lay him down, Ellen said quickly, checking for a pulse and alarm to find out how rapidly it was still beating. Quickly, she checked his breathing. He was still breathing. He was still breathing, but quick, shallow breaths. Stay with him, Fiona. I need to call an ambulance. Fiona watched as her mother gave the address and began telling the operator what had happened as she held Marshall's hand tightly in her own. Marsh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault, she said, checking his pulse and breathing on command. The flashing lights of the emergency responders could be seen from the window. Fiona didn't know who let them in, but her mother quickly led them up the stairs. He was strapped to a gurney, and quickly Ellen and Fiona followed. Only parents or relatives can go in the ambulance with him, the paramedic said, but Ellen was quick to answer. She's his caretaker, and I'm his emergency guardian. He nodded, and both women were allowed access to the back of the ambulance, taking seats as the medics did their work. What happened? The older of the two said. This time Fiona answered. We were having an argument. He was pacing, and then he got really pale, leaned against the wall, slid down it, and passed out. Is there any medications he's taking or allergic to? Anything he's being treated for? He went off chemotherapy almost 3 days ago, and he's not allergic to anything, Fiona said quickly as they drove along, arriving at the hospital in record time. The medical team switched off, and Marshall was brought behind a pair of double doors. Alan was on the phone with his mother, giving the nurses all the information needed, as Fiona paced around, not caring that she was in short shorts and an overly large t-shirt, not caring that she was barefooted. Marshall was in there with something terribly wrong with him, and it happened because they had fought, because of her. She wanted to hold it in, to bottle such painful emotions away, and having just had the conversation with Marshall about this, Fiona knew she couldn't. She wanted to scream and cry and could feel it building up in her chest. Fiona walked out of the hospital feeling on the very edge of hysteria, and sitting on the nearest bench, she pulled her knees to her chest, letting out a heartbroken sob. It was her fault. All of it was her fault. Marshall was in the hospital, and it was all her fault. Oof. That got intense really quick. I'll be right back with another chapter. Hang on a sec. Guys, I might not get to 3 hours today. I might only get to like maybe 2 hours. I'm not sure. I'm gonna keep going for as long as I can, but I want to make sure that everything's shut off but when my mom is on the way home. So I'll let you guys know like how much longer I can go for, but I might only be able to do like 2 hours, and I'm gonna try and record for another 2 hours tomorrow. So I'm probably gonna try and record some more chapters of A Guardian Angel, or maybe or maybe I'll just record for 2 hours today and 2 hours tomorrow, and then I'll just do like a mega upload, like a longer upload on Friday. Because that's all I can think of right now. That's the best I can think to do. Because there's no way I'm gonna make it to 3 hours or more. And I already finished 2 chapters, so I'm just gonna be reading like what I can. Um, I'm gonna try and read at least another 2 chapters. So let's start on another chapter because I want to know what the hell is gonna happen next. Hang on. Sorry, guys. It's just sorry. Oh, there's a rat. I see a rat. Someone snuggled up in a blanket. One of my ratties is laying in the fleece. They keep like moving. Sometimes they're in the Sputnik, and other times Mocha just like will bundle himself up in the fleece. There's this pile of fleece next to the Sputnik, so if I look, I can see Mocha like inside the fleece. Oh man! All right. So we're gonna go on to the next chapter now. Chapter 33, To Be Lucky. Nobody pushed her to talk about it, not her mother or Marshall's mother or FP, Ember, or Finn, who were all sitting in Marshall's hospital room. They just kept quiet, all of them thankful for the argument that had ended up saving his life. The doctor assigned to him had told them that Marshall had been suffering from near life-threatening anemia, and while Hannah and Ellen understood, Fiona was frustrated that she did not. "What does that mean?" she asked as the doctor now turned to face her. He was a kind man and made sure to break it down to an easy enough level for Fiona to digest. Anemia is defined as a hemoglobin level of less than 12 grams per deciliter. Hemoglobin are the cells in blood that bring oxygen throughout the body. His body wasn't getting enough oxygen from his blood. That's why he was constantly dizzy, tired, and lightheaded. That also explains his rapid heart rate and labored breathing. Marshall may even have had pains he didn't mention. His hemoglobin levels were 6.6 grams per deciliter. That was zero point 0.1 grams away from life-threatening. Oh, geez. Luckily, it's very highly treatable. That's what the transfusion is for. Healthy blood contains much more hemoglobin than Marshall has produced. It'll bring his levels up to a higher and hopefully a healthy level with just one transfusion. If not, we'll simply do another. So he'll be okay? The chances are very high that he'll be completely fine once he's been treated. Hearing this, Fiona let out a sigh of relief. I read the report on his arrival, and I feel I must mention he's very lucky to have been having that argument. Had he not overexerted himself, they probably wouldn't have found out about the anemia until it had affected his heart or other organs. With that, he'd left the room. For the first time in almost a month, Marshall didn't feel like complete crap when he woke up. He felt rested and completely awesome. Now the only thing left to wonder about was why it smelled like he was in a clinically scrubbed down hospital room. Shifting slightly but still keeping his eyes shut, Marshall could feel the starchy sheets rub against his skin. These were definitely not his sheets. It was then he picked up the sound of the heart monitor. Now he had to accept it. He was in the hospital. But why? He felt completely fine. Opening his eyes, Marshall pushed himself up, making eye contact with Ignitus, who was the only person in the room. Dude, I'm so sorry, the redhead said, looking so sincere as Marshall felt a jolt in his stomach. About what? He asked wearily. They had to take your legs. Quickly, Marshall flung the sheets off him, spotting his legs and making the redhead howl with laughter. Sorry, dude, it was too funny not to mess with you, he said, earning a hard punch from Marshall, who leaned back with a sigh of relief while simultaneously scowling at the redhead. Screw you, so what am I doing here? Apparently, you and Girlie got into it last night and you just collapsed. Which was totally lucky for you because the doctors found out that you were like beyond anemic. Had that gone unnoticed any longer than it did, and you and your dad would be hanging out much sooner than any of us would have hoped. I thought anemia was what happened when you bled a lot. Yeah, me too, dude, but apparently it's the loss of the hemoglobin, not the loss of the blood itself. So you can be anemic like you were, or you can bleed tons and become anemic that way. Apparently the set of drugs you were being given in your chemo batch was killing off your red blood cells. That explains your dizziness, lightheadedness, any pains you've been feeling, and it especially explains your zombie-like fatigue. Yeah, it does, because I feel beyond better right now, Marshall said, looking around. Where's everyone else? Finn, Ellen, and Emma went back to the house to get you and Fiona a change of clothes and her some shoes. She's been here barefoot and in PJs since 2 a.m. Your mom's downstairs forcing Girlie to eat. It's almost 4 in the afternoon and she hasn't eaten a thing. Well, I'm starving and would probably eat the paint off the walls, Marshall said as his stomach growled. I'll see what I can do. They'll probably want to check you out before you get to eat, though, Ignitus said, walking from the room to find a doctor. Marshall sat there looking around. The room was lit with the normal hospital fluorescent lights, and it smelled like a hospital. Looking down, he noticed the hospital gown and grimaced. They'd changed him. Now he began to get nosy, and spotting the IV in his arm, he poked it, and spotted the tube connected to it. It was red with blood. He followed the tube upwards, and it was connected to a bag halfway filled. Well, that's not gross, he said softly, trying to do something to relieve him of his boredom, and moments later a doctor entered with FP trailing after him. Ah, Mr. Abigail, welcome back. He said, picking up the chart at the foot of the bed. He began asking simple questions, which Marshall easily answered. Finally, the doctor began talking about what Ignitus had told him. So, we've already contacted your primary, and they're going to switch up the medications for your next round of chemotherapy. Okay, anything else I should know about? Yes, any increase in fatigue, much like the one you've been experiencing, is very abnormal. If you feel like that again, please inform your doctor immediately. With a nod and after checking in on all the machines he was hooked up to, the doctor left the room, and moments later his mother and Fiona returned. His mother was the first who rushed over, hugging him. Oh, Marshy, I'm glad to see you looking so much better, but we were all so worried about you, Hannah said, squeezing her son tightly in her arms. Marshall couldn't help but grin. I'm fine, Ma. I'm totally fine. Don't worry, he said as she released him from her grip. Fiona stood behind his mother, looking off to the side, but glancing up, her eyes met his. Ma, FP, can you give me and Fiona a minute, please? He asked, watching as his mother nodded, and his best friend stood, both walking from the room. Marshall, I'm so sorry. Fiona, stop it. The doctor told me everything. If you hadn't been your pain in the ass self and I hadn't been my pain in the ass self, then I'd either still be feeling like crap or I'd be dying right about now, Marshall said, reaching for the blonde, who quickly entered his arms and held him tight. So just tell me what it was, he said softly, watching as she practically melted in his arms. After learning everything, I don't know how you can still love me, she whispered. Marshall was floored. Is that all? Is that what you were so adamant to not tell me yesterday? Glob, Fiona, you're not. Now he sighed. You're not one-dimensional. There are many sides to you, and just because I learned about your past last night doesn't mean that to me you've become physically aggressive, or that you have a short temper, or even that you have the ability to put people in the hospital. Fiona, that's just part of who you were and who you are, but that's not all of who you are. One side of you does not define you. To me, you're like a puzzle. There are pieces of your past that I haven't seen yet. There are pieces of your future that we've yet to see. And right now, we're just living in the moment, putting pieces in place as we go. If I could never accept your past, how could I ever truly show you that I love you? Loving you means loving all of you, your past, your present, and whatever the future brings, not picking bits and pieces. And I do love you, and I'll continue to love you, regardless of what our future brings. Nothing in your past could ever get rid of me, because it's who you are now that matters. Besides, if it wasn't for your past shaping who you are, I probably never would have met you, he said, squeezing her tightly. Gosh, I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry about, Fee. You saved my butt, remember? Yeah, but no, no buts. You saved my butt. End of story, Fee. But Fiona. Now he paused, as he as he held her at arm's length. He was scowling at her, but as she stared into his eyes, his features softened as he smiled at her. Fiona, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice you gave me, and I suggest you follow it, okay? You ready for these little gems of wisdom? He asked, now tugging the blonde closer, watching as she looked at him in confusion, nodding her head as his arm wrapped around her waist and the other cradled her cheek. Just shut up and kiss me. Marcia watched the shock appear on her face as Fiona laughed, now leaning close over the bed rail. That's my line, but okay, she said, kissing him. But after a moment, Marshall broke it, unlocking the bed rail and sliding into the downwards position before pulling Fiona onto his lap and kissing her fiercely. The intensity of it reminding her of the kiss they'd shared on her birthday backstage, and just like the kiss backstage, they were again interrupted, only this time by two nurses who had rushed in because his heart monitor had taken notice that um, that his heart rate had increased quite substantially for someone resting in bed. They quickly entered the room, the older of the two immediately turning around and trying not to laugh, and the younger of the two who just couldn't help it as she leaned into the wall, red-faced, leaving both Marshall and Fiona to sit there in embarrassment. Well, Mr. Abidir, it seems we've discovered the reason for your dramatic increase in heart rate, she said, still laughing. You aren't allowed to do that in a hospital, so cut it out, she said, the seriousness completely ruined by the fact that she couldn't keep a straight face. Almost immediately, she left the room, still laughing, and leaving Fiona blushing in embarrassment. You know, Marshall said with a grin, I could always take the monitor off, he said with a smirk, kissing Fiona once again. Don't do that, the blonde said, pulling away from him to catch her breath. Then they'll think you're flatlining. Well, they already know what they're doing, so I don't think they'll be back too soon. Marshall said, continuing to kiss Fiona. We're back with food. Oh, Glob, you're both in a hospital. Have you no shame? Hannah asked, walking in with Ellen and Ignitus. Fiona, get a room, guys. Geez. Fiona had jumped at the sound of Marshall's mother, and even more so at the sound of her mother, but Marshall didn't seem to care. Oh, never mind. That was her mother, not Ignitus. Finally, when it seemed that she would no longer respond, he sighed, burying his face in her neck. It was just getting good, too. He sighed just loud enough for the blonde to hear. Finally, he raised his head. I'm the shameless one. She wanted to stop after the nurses caught us. Hearing this, FP laughed, while their mothers simply shook their heads in identical looks of parental shame and disappointment. Marshall, come on, Mom. This is the first time I've ever felt completely awesome in a month. If I want to make out with my girlfriend to celebrate this fact, I'm gonna, as long as she's willing, he said with a scowl, watching as her look of disappointment changed to one of pity. Geez, I swear, I don't know if I should smack you or what, she said, sticking the bag on his bed. Burgers and fries for you. Ignitus has your drink, she said, shaking her head and walking from the room, Ellen following, radiating disapproval. Hannah and Ellen continued to walk down the hall. Can we actually be mad at them for that? The dark-haired woman asked, looking over at the blonde who scowled, then sighed. No, I mean, put us in their shoes. If that was you and your Marshall, or me and Steve, we'd probably be all over them, especially after a fight. Fiona feels so guilty about that, Ellen said softly. Well, Marshall doesn't seem to be holding any grudges for it, so whatever they were fighting about must have been some kind of little spat. Yeah, maybe. How have you been? We haven't talked in a little bit. I know, right? Hannah said as they walked into the food court for some coffee. "This guy gave me his number at the bar after work the other day, but I'm not too sure about him," she said, pressing the button and watching as the machine dispensed her coffee. "Well, how so? I mean, nobody will ever match up to your Marshall, but that doesn't mean you have to be alone forever. Elle, I'm not sure I want anybody else. But this guy, he's suave and sophisticated and smooth as all hell, but something about him puts me off. I don't know what about him it is, but it does. I mean, everyone who knew of my husband knows at least a little bit about my life, so they have the advantage there. He just seemed to know a bit too much for my comfort." Oh, what was he saying? Well, what was he saying? Now they sat at the table. "Well, he knew about Marshall, but who doesn't know about my son? He was all over the news with his father always. But what creeped me out was he knew my son was in a band. It's like he purposely was seeking me out to learn more about my son." "Well, according to Fiona, there are several labels looking to sign the boys. Maybe he's from one of them. Did he give you a card or something?" Ellen asked, taking a sip of her coffee and watching as Hannah dug through her purse. "He did, actually. I just tossed it in and left because he was weirding me out. I didn't even look at it," she said, finally finding the black business card from her bag. "You're right, he's with a record company," she said, handing the card to the blonde who took it. "Blood Rain Records CEO and founder, Anderson Litch." Pulling out her phone, Ellen searched for the company on her phone and found it immediately. "Yeah, it's legit." It's a legit musical recording studio. If what Fiona says is true, and several places are vying for them to make a selection, it could be that this guy is trying to buddy up for you. Is trying to buddy up to you in an attempt for Marshall and the guys to pick them, Ellen said, putting her phone away and handing her friend back the card. "Well, it's like I said, the guy puts me off for whatever the reason. There's just something creepy about him," Hannah said, fiddling with the card in her hand. "Well, it's not like you have to call him. Just forget about it." Hearing this, Hannah nodded. "You're right. I have more important things to worry about than some weirdo." Together they stood, making their way back to Marshall's room, and passing by a trash can. Hannah tossed the card in, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. Ellen was right. It was best not to dwell. She'd just forget about it. When their mothers returned, a nurse was in the process of removing the transfusion line from the IV and then the IV itself. The doctor was also in the room talking to Marshall, who was putting his t-shirt on and his jeans and sneakers already on. "We'll just save some time and schedule the test for your hemoglobin levels before your next round of chemotherapy, and we'll do another test in the middle of the week to see if we have to change up the medication again, all right?" "Sounds fair enough." "Good, and remember, after your chemotherapy you may feel fatigued and sick, but that only lasts a day or two, and it decreases as the days go by. It's not supposed to increase, so if you start to feel fatigued and aren't getting better, come back here immediately. Understood?" "Loud and clear. I cannot wait to go home," he said with a grin, feeling beyond fantastic. This was like pre-cancer fantastic. After signing several papers, Marshall was free to go home, and as they walked to the car, Ellen wrapped her arm around Fiona's shoulders. "Sweetie, come ride with me. Give Marshall and his mom time to talk," she said, steering the blonde to her car as they ignited Marshall and Hannah headed in the opposite direction. "Mom, what's wrong?" Fiona asked as they sat in the car. "Fiona, I'm always going to worry endlessly about you. You know that. I just want you two to be careful because Marshall won't end up being the one who gets pregnant." "Mom," Fiona groaned, "we've already talked about this." "No, we haven't. Not me and you, me and Marshall. He said that he won't so much as touch me intimately until we're both ready, and since I still blush when I see him shirtless, that really won't be for a long while," she said, looking out the window, trying to avoid the embarrassment. "Okay. Who brought up that discussion?" she asked seriously. She liked Marshall. He was a sweet boy, but sometimes boys could be pushy. "I did. His mom pretty much gave us the talk in the car, and since we were on the topic, I figured we should figure out where we stand on the tier chart." Now Ellen looked confused. "What's a tier chart?" "It's a Finn and Jake reference. Tier 1 is hugging, Tier 2 is kissing, Tier 3 is more intense kind of kissing, Tier 4 is for making out, Tier 5 is kissing and touching, but not like feeling each other up, and Tier 6 is making out and feeling each other up with clothes on. Tier 7. How many tiers are there? 15, the blonde said simply, continuing her explanation. Ah, okay, go on. Tier 7 is the same as 5, but with no shirts, but underclothes are on. Tier 8 is when you feel each other up without clothes, but keep underclothes. Tier 9, I guess, is when you actually see each other without clothes and kiss and stuff. Jake said that afterwards you need a comfy place to sit, because you'll be thinking about what you did all day. Tier 10 is touching without clothes. Tier 11 is making out without clothes. Tier 12 is making out and touching without clothes. Tier 13 is making out and touching certain places without clothes. Tier 14 is showing special attention to certain places, with or without clothes on, and Tier 15 is sex. Ah, and and where would you classify yourself and Marshall? Ellen asked, fearing the answer. About Tier 5. Yeah, that's about where we are. Really? She asked in surprise. She'd expected much more to be going on. Yeah, no kidding. We just kiss and snuggle and junk. There's not much to worry about, Fiona said with a laugh. She wa- she watched as her mother sighed, looking much more comfortable. That makes me feel much better, actually, Ellen said as they drove along, heading back to Marshall's house. It's just with Jake and Lady's little slip up, and knowing you and Marshall are in a relationship. I don't want you to be in over your head. I mean, with Finn, I don't have to worry. He's not dating anyone right now. Hearing this, Fiona blinked, then came to a realization. Finn and Ember hadn't come back to the hospital after returning to get clothes with her mom, and she knew for a fact they were dating. Mom? Yes, love? You do know that Finn and Ember have been going out for a few months, right? She said in shock that her mother could be so oblivious. It seems she didn't know because Fiona felt the car speed up. There was nothing unusual when they arrived. Finn and Ember were playing video games, and aside from them both being a little flustered, there was nothing to say that they'd done something in the house that they shouldn't. Okay, Finn, time to go. I have work tonight, and you need to prepare my case. You, darling son, have classes to sign up for. Kiss your girlfriend goodbye and let's go. You're dating my sister? FP growled, now returning from getting dressed for work and standing in front of Finn. Hearing the tone in his voice, Ember winced, looking over nervously. Yeah, I am. There was a standoff as the two boys simply stared at each other. Fine, but if you hurt her in any way, I'll end you. Ignitus! Now he turned to his sister. Amber, shut up for a minute, he said, giving his little sister a firm look that silenced her. Now he turned back to Finn. If you disrespect her in any way, and I find out, you're going to have to deal with me. These muscles aren't just for looks. I earned them right along with my police record. So think carefully. I have no problem getting arrested for fighting a complete stranger. Just imagine what I'd be willing to do for my baby sister if she gets hurt. Now he turned to Ellen, all smiles. Drive safe, Mrs. Wright. I would love some cookies the next time I visit my Nana. I'll buy the ingredients if you do the cooking, he said with a grin. Marsh Fee, I'll see y'all later. Baby sister, he said, now turning to Ember, I'll expect you'll be wanting to yell at me later, but I'm going to be working late, so let's save that till tomorrow, yeah? Now he turned back to Finn. Treat her like your very existence depends on it, because it does, he said, giving the group a wave before heading to his truck. Holy crap, that was intense, Fiona said, looking around the room at the others. Ember was frantic. This is exactly why she didn't tell her brother in the first place. He had a habit of scaring people away. Yes. Finn, I'm really sorry. It's about that. Sometimes Icky's just. She was caught completely off guard when Finn silenced her with a kiss. Ember, I'm not afraid of your brother, Finn said with a grin. The red-headed girl, however, was still nervous. Finn, he doesn't make idle threats. I believe that, but I've absolutely no intentions of hurting you, so I have nothing to worry about. Besides, he's not the only person who can fight. It's not my intention to fight him, but I can defend myself just fine if need be. I'll call you later, he said, giving her another kiss and waving a goodbye to Fiona and Marshall as their mother hugged the blonde teen. Behave, both of you, and Marshall, keep an eye on yourself. Anything weird and write to the doctors, okay? Understood, madame. Oh, good. I'll see you in a week or so, she said, blowing Fiona a kiss as she shut the door. Now Ember, Marshall, and Fiona were left in the living room. I think I need to take a walk. Ember said, standing from the love seat. Do you need someone to walk with you? Fiona asked, watching as she shook her head. No, I just have to think alone for a little bit. Come up with some kind of way to talk Ignitus out of trying to kill Finn if we break up or something, she said, putting her sneakers on and walking out the door. So, Marshall said, his arm on the back of the couch as he glanced over at Fiona. I'm not hooked up to any heart monitors or IVs. There are no nurses to barge in. Your mom and brother are gone. Em went for a walk and FP's at work, he said with a grin, looking over at the blonde who smoked at him. Is that so? She asked, knowing full well what he was thinking. Yup. So, what do you want to do? Fiona said, turning to face him. Now he wrapped his arms around her, pulling Fiona close. You know exactly what I want to do, he breathed in her ear, giving the blonde goosebumps and getting them in return as Fiona kissed his neck. Well, you're in luck, because I just can't get enough of you, she whispered as Marshall kissed her fiercely, taking her breath away. Then, to her surprise, he scooped her off the couch, breaking the kiss. Where are we going? Fiona asked, sounding so innocent in his arms. My room, no interruptions, just you and me, and our goal is to try to break the world record for the longest makeout session, Marshall said with a grin, taking the steps two at a time and kicking the door shut behind him as he entered his room. Placing the blonde on his bed, he shuffled out of his hoodie, tossing it aside, and to his surprise, Fiona grabbed him by his shirt, pulling him down onto the bed, kissing him hard. For someone with record-breaking intent, you really are taking your sweet time, she said with a smirk as Marshall laughed once again, kissing down her neck and finding that spot on her collarbone that made her melt in his arms as she sighed, her hands exploring his shoulders and arms. Fiona gasped as he continued the sweet torture on her neck, and before it became too much for her to handle, Fiona dislodged him, kissing her lips, and feeling as he crushed her body against his as he held her tightly. Marshall could feel her hands, one resting on his chest, still gripping his shirt, and the other hooked under his arm and resting on his shoulder. Tentatively, he brushed his tongue against her lip as he kissed her again. This, he knew, was new to her, and he slowed down the kiss as slowly as she copied him. As slowly she copied him, though she hadn't expected him though she hadn't expected him to open his mouth and brush his tongue against hers. That was a new sensation she hadn't been expecting, and it made her stop in her tracks and blink her eyes open as Fiona tried to decide whether she liked it or not. Marshall waited as slowly as she tried to Marcia waited as slowly she kissed him back, trying again, this time expecting the sensation. They kissed again, once, twice, three times. She could definitely get used to this, and closing her eyes once again, he kissed her deeper. Fiona could feel Marshall's hand moving from her hip to her waist, hesitating at the small of her back, then moving to her thigh. The other moved along her back and around to her front, stopping just below her bra. Can I touch you? He asked softly, breaking the kiss and waiting for her to answer. Yes, Fiona breathed as he began kissing her again. Honestly, she was a bit surprised, expecting him to go right for what had been no-go areas for him only moments ago. Instead of that, though, he'd gone back to doing what he had been before. Fiona thought that maybe he'd misheard her somehow. But this time, as his hand moved down her back, instead of hesitating and moving to her thigh, his hand moved down past the small of her back, caressing her butt, before moving down the rest of her legs, stopping at her calf and moving back up, before coming to rest on her butt as he pulled her closer to him, kissing her harder before pulling back. Your legs are amazing, he breathed, not even giving her time to respond as he kissed Fiona again. He moved his hand back to her waist before allowing the other to wander, slowly moving higher up until once again he stopped just at the bottom of her bra. Are you okay with this, Fiona? He asked, looking at her seriously, looking for any sign that it might be too much for her. Yes, only you, she whispered, watching as he stared at her intently, looking for any sign that she'd change her mind, and seeing none, he began kissing her neck once again as her hands tangled themselves in his hair as slowly he moved downwards, kissing every available inch of skin, moving from her neck to the patch of silky soft skin not covered by her shirt, that showed just a bit of cleavage before moving back up and kissing her lips. Fiona felt as his hands slowly moved further up her chest, and hoped that she wouldn't feel the painful squeezing and tugging of her sensitive skin that she'd felt before. That painful, unwanted experience had left her bruised for almost 2 weeks. Instead, he just rested his hand on the rise of her chest. It was like he was waiting for her to give her permission again. To give him permission again, and deciding to do so, Fiona nodded her head as she continued to kiss him, gently with the slightest hint of pressure. He began rubbing the softness beneath his palm, making the blonde beneath him groan into their kiss and arch her back, pushing herself harder into his hand. It was a strange sensation she felt after he moved his hand away. It was rivaling an ache, like her body ached for him to touch her again. And reaching down, she guided his hand back to her chest, holding him firmly against her as she kissed him harder. It just felt so good, especially when he got the gist of her motion and continued kneading her breast before moving to the next one. Marshall grinned into the kiss when Fiona's hands started exploring more than his neck, shoulders, and arms. Slowly, her palm dragged across his chest, the tips of her fingers leaving a tingling sensation as she now moved down his stomach. Though just before she reached the top of his jeans, Fiona's hand moved towards his side, letting her hand rest on his hip as she tangled her fingers into his belt loop. Her other hand moved from his shoulder, moving down past his shoulder blade and down his back, feeling the muscles under her fingertips. Slowly they began to wind down, the kisses slowing, the intensity lessening with each kiss gone by, hands moving back to more appropriate areas, until eventually they wound around each other, each holding the other close. Fiona smiled, relaxing underneath the blonde when he felt her nuzzle into him. These were the actions of a content Fiona. Lazily his hand played with her hair as she hummed in pleasure, her fingers moving in slow patterns on his chest. Fiona could feel her eyes getting heavier as her blinking slowed. "I love you, Marshall Lee Abidier," she said softly. "And I love you, Fiona Wright, formerly Mertens and future Abidier," he said, feeling her smile against his chest. "I love you. I love you more," Marcia whispered as he kissed the top of her head, feeling as slowly her fingers stopped moving as she drifted off to sleep. Marshall wasn't even tired, and it made him wonder if Fiona had even slept while he was in the hospital. His eyes found the clock and he spotted the time. It was nearing 8 p.m. Damn, more than 2 hours. What is the record for longest makeout session, anyways? Curious, he grabbed his phone, looking it up. Holy hell, 30 hours, 29 minutes, and 27 seconds? That's making out all day and then some. We need practice, he said quietly to himself. Carefully, he dislodged Fiona from him, gently easing her onto the mattress before grabbing fresh clothes and walking to the door. Dimming the light, he headed downstairs for a shower. It seemed that Ember at some point had returned and she was watching the TV. Looking over, she spotted him. "I was back for more than an hour and just too afraid to know what you guys were up to," she said, watching as Marshall grinned with a laugh. "It was nothing, Em, just training to break a record," he said, leaving her to blush as he walked into the bathroom for a shower, determined to wash the hospital smell from his skin. A shower standing all alone in the bathroom. Who knew the things you missed when you couldn't have them anymore? Showers were definitely something he'd taken for granted. Getting out of the shower, he dried and dressed, leaving the towel on his shoulders after drying his hair. He was hungry. It was then that Marshall decided to make dinner. Walking into the kitchen, and pulling out a pot and filling it with water, he placed it on the stove, cranking the burner to high, and digging in the cabinet for a box of spaghetti. He found one and opened it up. "You hungry?" he asked, looking over to the redhead. "Nah, I grabbed something to eat while I was out." With a nod, Marshall dumped half the box in and tossed it back in the cabinet, and pulled out a jar of sauce, opening it with a loud pop. "Are you good at concocting a way to make this taste like it didn't come from a jar? Because I've been working on it, and I just haven't found the right mix of ingredients yet," Marshall called over his shoulder, watching Ember walk over as he stirred the pasta, careful to not let it stick. Grabbing the salt, he sprinkled some into the boiling spaghetti water before putting it back off to the side, as he began doctoring up the sauce with various spices and bringing it to his usual sauce. He motioned Ember to try, and it did. "See, still tastes like jar," she thought for a moment, and reaching into the cabinet, she pulled out some sugar and sprinkled it in, tasting the sauce again. "Try it now." Taking the spoon, Marshall tried it, looking at the redhead in shock. It was just missing sugar? Who puts sugar in sauce? People who don't make sauce from a jar mush, she said with a grin, walking back to the TV. He turned the sauce to a simmer and covered it, waiting for the spaghetti to cook. Deciding he wanted garlic bread, Marshall grabbed butter, garlic powder, and Parmesan cheese and began mixing it together and sticking it in the microwave to melt it. Now he looked to see if he still had those rebake, almost done rolls in the fridge. Finding them, he tossed a few in the oven for a few minutes, waiting until they almost browned before pulling them out and smothering them in the melted cheesy garlic butter and sticking them back in the oven. What smells so awesome? Ember asked, calling from the living room. Garlic bread! Now he looked around for the strainer, finding it and tossing it in the sink and dumping the spaghetti and water into it. Now he made 2 plates of the sauce-covered pasta and pulled the rolls from the oven, being sure that the oven and all the burners were off. He put 2 rolls on each plate, smothering them with the remaining garlic mixture before making his way upstairs. I left you a roll on the stove, Em, Marshall said, passing her as he made his way upstairs. He hadn't even made it to his room before hearing the redhead's voice shouting praises of his garlic bread. Marshall opened the door before kicking it shut again. Normally he would have let Fiona sleep, but knowing this was her favorite meal, Marshall nudged the blonde, who breathed in deeply, yawning as she woke up. I smell deliciousness, and it's not the food, she said, sleepily sitting up as Marshall sat down, offering the food which she gladly took. Oh my glob, it is deliciousness, the blonde said through a mouthful of food as Marshall just hummed in agreement. Oh, and the bread! Now Marshall couldn't help but laugh. You know, they say that a way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and I think that rings true. But I think that rings true for you too, Fee. He, but I think that rings true for you, true Fee, he said with a grin before reaching over he said with a grin, reaching over to wipe a bit of sauce from her chin before taking another bite of his food. As long as you make me spaghetti, it definitely counts, the blonde said with a grin. So I looked it up, the world record set for making out. So, yeah? Fiona asked, now intrigued. We didn't even make a dent in that record. To beat it, we'd have to make out for 30 hours and 30 minutes straight. That's a lot of making out. Did the winning couple have kids within 9 months of setting the record? I think they may have, Marshall said, putting his empty plate aside on the table and taking Fiona's as she handed it to him. Well, you know what that means, right? He asked, watching as Fiona blushed with a smirk. We need more practice, she said as his arms wrapped around her, holding her close. That was exactly my thought, Marshall said, bringing his lips to hers. Yeah, these chapters are getting longer. They end up being like about half an hour long. By the way, both my rats are awake now, and I'm watching them, and it's really cute. Mocha looks like Mocha's going back to the blankets. He's sniffing around the blankets. I wish you guys could see exactly what's happening because it's cute rat behavior. They're just doing normal rat things, but it's so cute to watch. Anyway, I will be back with another chapter. All right, my rats fell back asleep. I changed out their water in their food dish because the food had poop in it and their water dish had food in it. I'm trying to get them a water bottle so that I'm gonna get them a water bottle this weekend if I haven't, gotten them a if my mom can't find the water bottle that I already bought because I don't know where the hell I put it. So if I can't find a water bottle by this weekend, I'm just gonna get them another one in the next couple days. I mean, unless for whatever miracle reason my mom decides to look for it, but I'm guessing she's, gonna be too busy, so I'm just gonna probably end up buying them another water bottle so we can keep a clean environment because I want them to have access to clean water and stuff. But usually I end up changing out their water like 2 to 3 times a day at least. So like if I like I'll check on them periodically, and if I see anything floating in their water, I'll change it out. Or one it only happened one time that they didn't have any water left, and I have no idea what happened with that. I don't know if they just drank a lot of water. That's also why I want like a water bottle, because just the water dish that they have right now is actually very, very small, so it doesn't even hold a lot. So I kind of want like a bigger water option for them, like a bigger water dish for them to have water in. I mean, unless I just give them another water dish or something, which I might. But regardless of that, I just want to make sure that they have clean water and that they have access to enough water. So I'm gonna get them at least one water bottle and maybe two, and just attach it to like the cage so that they have access to clean water at all times. And that way I don't have to like change out the water bottle, every day. I mean, I'm assuming I'm still gonna have to clean out the water bottle or whatever for bacteria, but I can easily do that, and I'm not super worried about it as long as they have like clean water and clean food. I don't want their food to be tainted, so like when I found the poop in their food dish, I just dumped the dish. I just dumped whatever was left in the food dish into the compost because it wasn't much, and I don't want them eating that. I don't want their food to be tainted. I don't know if it's okay if they eat their own poop or not. I just took a second to look it up, and not only do they eat their poop, it's actually quite good for them. I already knew that like some animals will eat their poop, but I didn't know that rats are one of the ones that will like eat their poop. So, maybe they'll eat their poop. I don't know. Maybe that's why there's not much of it when I go to clean out the cage. But regardless of that, I think we're gonna move on to the next chapter because I think as far as rat poop goes, we've had enough of that, right? And I just want to say I did look a little bit ahead, which I normally wouldn't do, but I looked at the first couple like sentences of the story just to see like what is happening because I was really curious. But the thing is, it's it's gone into like the other characters' lives. Like I know it mainly revolves around Marshall and Fiona, but there's also stuff about like the other characters. Like I know they went into like FP and Ember's life a little bit, which was fantastic. And, like it was pretty cool to see is my point. And so let's anyway, so what I've got is this next chapter seems like it's gonna be about Moko's life, so I'm really curious about this. And compared to the other chapters, it seems like kind of a shorter one, so interesting. Anyway, so we're gonna go on to the next chapter. Yeah, the rats are snuggled away in their Sputnik. Chapter 34, The Struggle of Loss. Nobody knows the real me. Nobody knows how many times I've cried in my room when nobody is watching. Nobody knows how many times I've lost hope, how many times I've been let down. Nobody knows how many times I've felt like I'm about to snap, but I just don't for the sake of others. Nobody knows the thoughts that go through my head when I'm sad, how horribly true they are. Nobody knows me, not a soul. Modestus Cronin, are you paying attention? Mokro. What? Everyone calls me Mokro or Mo, not Modestus, he said, quietly pouring a mixture of grain and oats into the feed buckets for the horse stalls. My sister gave you a beautiful name. You're named after our father. You should be proud to have his name, she said softly. Turning, he faced his Aunt Dessa. She was a firm yet soft-spoken woman, and her strawberry blonde hair was tied back today in a low ponytail, and she was wearing her riding boots. He decided to change the subject. Are you taking Lily out for a ride? Yes, I was going to brush her down first. I've already done it. Modus, Mo, you don't have to stay in the stables. You know there's plenty of room in the house. You could have any room, she said softly, watching as he prepared Lily for a ride, placing down first a cushioned blanket, then the saddle on her, strapping it securely in place before fitting her with a bit and bridle, leading the white horse to his aunt, handing her the reins. I know, I just don't want to be here, he said softly before walking back to the second stall, which contained the rather rowdy, solid black stallion. Dessa chewed her lip. What can I do for you, sweetie? She asked softly. It had happened just before the summer, that terrible car crash. She was almost positive that none of his friends either knew or cared. She hoped it was the latter and that he just neglected to tell them. He had always been quiet, and that hadn't changed. The only difference now was that he went from having two doting, loving parents to being an orphan. She and her husband had taken him in immediately, and the boy hadn't shed a single tear, not once that they'd seen, and he moved robotically around the house until finally, only a week later, he moved everything from the room into the loft in the barn. When she'd asked why, he simply responded that he wanted to be closer to the horses during the thunderstorms because the thunder and lightning had frightened them. He had been standing on the metal bars of the stallion's door when he answered, albeit very softly, "You can't do anything. Nobody can do anything because my parents are never coming back. They're dead. Nothing will change that." Hearing this, she nodded. He was right. Knowing nothing She could say or do whatever would bring her sister and her sister's husband back, but she knew she needed to do something. The boy before her was completely broken. Dinner will be ready at 6 if you're hungry, she watched as he nodded, reaching out to the stallion and placing his hand on his head. She knew he wouldn't be there. He was never there. That didn't stop her from setting a place for him every night, though. If I'm hungry, I'll be there, he said just loud enough for her to hear him. With that, he watched as she mounted her steed and trotted off before returning his attention to the horse before him. Are you going to work with me today or what? The horse huffed and turned his back to the teen. Fine, I don't like you anyways, he said, turning away to grab a broom and shovel to clean out Lily's stall, which happened to be right next to the stallion's. The wheelbarrow was already close at hand and made his work much easier. Once the stall was clean of waste, he began sweeping it, and when he passed the open section that connected the two stalls, he felt a sharp biting jerk at the top of his head. Jerk, horse! Cut the crap, man! He growled, rubbing his head ruefully, wondering if he had a bald spot from where his hair had just been bitten. Once again the horse huffed and turned his back to him while he continued sweeping the stall. Once Lily's stall had been cleaned and restocked with food and fresh water, Moko noticed his cousin heading towards him. Hello, Mo. Gummy, I'll be taking Rainicorn for a ride. You do realize that's the stupidest name for a horse ever, right? That's probably why he's so mean, because he hates his name. I think it's a splendid name. Of course you do, but when I think of the pitiful name Rainicorn, I think of rainbows and butterflies and a mare. It's a girl's name, he said, watching as Gummy grabbed a saddle and bit. He'll learn to accept his name, won't you, Rainicorn? Moko watched as the horse bit at him. See? He hates his name, Moko said with a laugh, watching as the horse resisted being brought from the stall, though eventually submitted to the blond boy's demands. After a few minutes of silence, Bubba rode from the stable without another word to his cousin. Immediately he went to work on the stallion's stall, cleaning the filth, sweeping the hay, filling the food, and refreshing the water. It wasn't that he had to take care of the horses, he wanted to. It was a distraction, a very good, lengthy, and physically draining distraction from the thoughts in his head. It had been less than 15 minutes after he'd finished when he'd heard the low rumbling of thunder. His Aunt Dessa had returned mere moments later, leading Lily to his stall, removing the riding equipment. But after another few minutes, a much louder, rumbling clap of thunder was heard, along with a shout of shock and a shrieking neigh. Baba! Dessa screamed as she ran from the stables. Moko was more concerned with the horse, as it was now running frantically towards the stable, riderless. Bubba always got thrown by the stallion. It entered the stable neighing frantically, rearing up and stomping his hooves. Yo, calm down! Mo shouted, trying to get a hold of the reins, before succeeding on his fourth attempt at a grab. The horse reared up again, and he pulled down hard on the reins, grounding him. You're a pain in the ass, stupid horse! Seriously, Thunder, you're a 1-ton animal! He snapped, rubbing the horse's head and neck. You're a pansy because you have a freaking sissy ass name, he said, leading the now calmed horse to his stall. Modesta, sweetie, are you okay? His Aunt Dessa asked, running in. This is the last straw with this horse. Nobody can control him. He has to go. If we keep him, Bubba's going to get really hurt one of these days, she said, now looking at the horse in frustration. Just because Gummy can't control him doesn't mean others can't, Mo said, as he continued rubbing the horse's neck as he locked the latch to the gate. We can't keep him. He's just too dangerous. He's afraid of thunder and lightning. Gummy should have known that if this is his horse. Then he added as an afterthought. Plus he hates his name. Huh? It's Rainicorn. That's a girl's name. He's not a male, he's a stallion. Let me keep him. If you want to get Gummy another horse, fine, I'll take care of that one too. But don't get rid of this one because he can't handle the commitment of a living creature. Now the horse rested his head on Mo's shoulder just as Bubba hurried in. Mother, that horse is atrocious. That horse is atrocious. We must get rid of him immediately. Bartholomew, when was the last time you fed your horse? What? When was the last time you cleaned the stall or groomed him? A while ago, I guess, Mother. Why? We're not getting rid of this horse, and we're certainly not getting another. What? Why? You haven't proven that you're capable or even responsible enough to care for another creature's life, Modestus. Mokro, sweetie, you can have the horse. Name him whatever you want. But he's my horse. One you don't clean, feed, or care for. Now go take a shower, Bartholomew, she said, pointing out the door and following after her son. Well, the first thing we're gonna do is get rid of your sissy ass name, pansy boy. How about Lord Monochromacorn? Much more manly, right? He asked as the horse nickered softly. That's what I thought, he said quietly. I'm going upstairs, so don't be a pain in my ass, okay? He asked, watching as the horse walked over to the food pail. He walked from the section of the stables and headed to the stairs to the upper level. It was basic amenities, electricity, running water downstairs. He'd even found a mini fridge and a portable burner. The one annoyance was that he had no way to get a bed up here. The hallway was far too narrow for a mattress or box spring to make it up the stairs. He knew. He'd tried. So instead he'd hooked up a large hammock between four beams near the ceiling. The bales of hay acting as stairs to get him up there. And speaking of the bales of hay, it was pretty soft and also made a comfy bed or a comfortable place to relax. It was better by far than Marshall's sofa, but then again, a bed of nails would be more comfortable than that sofa. Thinking of the sofa of pain had reminded him of Marshall and that he was sick. He'd gone to visit him in the hospital after getting a call from FP, but seeing him in that hospital bed near dead had reminded him of his parents, and he could only stand to be there for a little over an hour before he faked an excuse to leave. Marshall was a great friend, he really was. He was a dependable guy in a fight and always had a wisecrack, and was by far smarter than most gave him credit for. He was the big brother he'd never had. Being the youngest in the group, he'd seen all of them as family, but Marshall was the leader. In that moment, had imagined not only a world without his parents, but a world without Marshall Lee, and he didn't like that in the least. Moko wondered when he would tell them about it, the accident. His aunt thought he'd just blocked it out. But that was entirely wrong. He lived and breathed every day with his mind on the day he lost his parents. His mother Alyssa was golden haired and beautiful and wise, not just book smart, but street wise. She'd been around the block and had always known what he was going through before he did. And his father, Richard, dark-haired and brilliant, hard-working and strong, he was a man of many talents, and had been the one to teach him how to play the guitar in the first place. Now they were nothing more than a memory. Never again would he hear their voices, his mother's serene voice singing terribly while doing chores, his father managing to somehow keep his cigarette in his mouth and whistle as he worked on the cars in the shop, their laughter at some stupid television show, or even see them dancing on the back porch in the summer night to some kind of old classy kind of music they'd played at their wedding. Now all of it was gone like smoke in the wind. He'd walked back home 4 times before their belongings were packed and sent to his aunt's storage room in the basement. After a few days, nothing smelled like his parents anymore. The funeral was small and quiet, taking place less than a week after prom, the accident happening the very same night that FP and Ash decided to crash Fiona's prom. It was lucky he'd even remembered his own prom. He drunk his way through it, matching FP drink for drink, though he definitely had a head start. They had lived on life support for 3 days before slipping away into the night. His parents were in a coffin together, their hands interlocked. His aunt had tried to make him feel better. It almost looks as if they're sleeping, doesn't it? She'd asked. But it didn't, they just looked dead, and he'd told her so. He refused to go to the funeral, to watch them be lowered into the ground and covered in dirt, because that meant that they were truly gone from this world. He'd had a small childish hope that they would open their eyes and shout surprise and pull him into their arms, his dad rubbing his shoulder and his mother kissing the top of his head like they'd always done. Mo knew it was a stupid thing to believe, but he still hoped, knowing that his hopes were useless. He couldn't bring himself to tell them. His friends liked his parents, and his parents loved his friends. They would have loved Fiona too, and she them. But how does somebody bring up the subject? Oh, hey guys, just figured I'd let you know that my parents have been dead, and for the last 3 months, mainly the ones you've been on chemo, Marsh, I've been an orphan, because now is definitely the best time to distract you from your own well-being. How could he tell them without breaking into a million pieces? They'd never seen him cry before, not once. His parents were the best, while Marshall's mom focused on work and FP's parents favored Ember, and Ash's mother just ignored both, he and his sister. His parents were the best, and now they were gone, violently ripped from this world and from him. Mo had to talk to someone about this, to get it all out, and it seemed that the universe was in agreement with this, because the moment the thought crossed his mind, his phone began to vibrate in his pocket. The only people who called him now were the guys in the band and occasionally Fiona inviting him over to hang with them. He hadn't even bothered to check the caller ID. Yo, dude, what the heck is going on? Your house is empty, Marshall's voice with said through the speaker, and in the background he could hear the others. Did he move? Fiona asked. Maybe something's wrong with the house and they had to leave, FP Ash said, but it was FP's comment that killed him, that broke the floodgates open. This is bullshit. It's raining and I need Mrs. C's cocoa. Because that's what his mother did. Summer, fall, winter, spring, any rainy day was a perfect day for hot chocolate, and it was the simple mention of hot chocolate that had ripped his heart from his chest and caused the heaving sobs to begin. Whoa, Mo, what's wrong? Dude, talk to me, buddy. What happened? I'm at Gummies, he said, hanging up the phone. Time passes different when you're grieving than it does for other people. Day seems shorter, night seems perpetually everlasting, and it seems like it's raining always, even when there's not so much as a cloud in the sky. It was always raining, always. His skies were pouring down the tears he'd refused to give into. Now it seemed that it had actually started raining. He couldn't hold the tears back. It's as if his parents were crying along with him, then crying at the distance, and he at the lost chance of something as simple as a goodbye from the people he loved the most. He hadn't heard them climb the stairs, or even approach noisily as they headed over. What he felt was the warmth as arms enveloped him, holding him tightly. The touch alone only made him cry harder. The last hug he'd gotten from his mother when he'd left that night on his way to the gym those 3 months ago. He'd refused to allow physical contact since then, and his Aunt Dessa had tried. His Uncle Barty had tried. Even once or twice Bubba had tried a gesture so small as touching his shoulder. It was why he'd moved to the stable. He couldn't handle it. That hug, though, reminded him of his father's, which only served to make him sob harder and hold on to the person who had hugged him. The phone call had freaked all of them out beyond all reason. He had been fine the last time they'd seen him. FP had only seen him yesterday, when he'd helped he and Ember move some furniture into their new apartment. Nothing was wrong then. The drive to Gummies had gone faster than it ever had, pulling up the long driveway. FP slammed the band van into park, and they all piled out, running to not just escape the torrential downpour of rain, but to find their friend. Marshall was the first to make it to the door and was pounding on it when the rest of them had made it to the porch. The door opened, revealing Bubba's mother, Dessa, whom the boys were familiar with. Marshall was the first to speak. "Where's Mo and what's wrong with him?" he asked quickly, watching as she stared in shock. "He never told you?" "Told us what?" Ash asked while FP looked around, antsy to get a move on. "Oh, Glob, I can't believe she looked ready. I can't believe he She looked ready to cry herself. 3 months ago, his parents passed away in a car accident. The group was floored. 3 months. He'd been living alone with this for 3 months. Where is he? Fiona asked quickly, already ready to push Bubba's mother out of the way to search the mansion for her friend. He moved himself into the stables over there, the strawberry blonde said, pointing to a large building at the end of the yard, and already the boys were running over there, and after a quick thank you, Fiona hurried after them, a good distance behind. The guys had already entered the stable while she was still being soaked in the downpour, but upon entering the stable, she immediately wished she hadn't. Mo's heart-wrenching sobs echoed through the building, and almost immediately her eyes filled with tears at the sound. Quickly she climbed the stairs, a watery, dripping mess, and found the older boy hugging Marshall as he sobbed. FP had a hand on his shoulder and was talking to him, while Ash had a hand on his back, crouched next to him. Fiona sat silently on a hay bale, knowing that they needed their time and their space, as she held back tears. "It's okay, buddy, it's okay. We're here, we've got you. It's okay, Marshall kept saying over and over, as he held the younger teen in his arms, hugging him tightly. Losing a parent at any age sucks. Even losing a shitty parent sucks, but losing two amazing parents at the same time. Sometimes the world was cruel, sometimes it took things from you, small things in the vastness of the never-ending universe, things you loved despite how little influence they had on the world. But that doesn't mean they didn't have some kind of impact on your world, that they weren't your world. The worst thing was that it was always the smallest things you missed the most. I I miss her hot chocolate, he sobbed, barely able to catch his breath between sentences. And the smell of engine grease and cigarette smoke. I I I breathe, kid. It's okay. It's gonna be okay, FP said softly. Fiona listened, her heart breaking as he took a sharp intake as he took a sharp inhale of air, unable to stop his tears. I kept going home. I just wanted them to be home, so I kept going home. He sobbed now, pulling back, and finally looking at Marshall, who swallowed thickly as his friend continued to cry. But they weren't there, and I just kept going back until there was nothing left, he said hysterically, the tears never stopping as he reached for his friend, his big brother, once more. Marshall was quick to hold the teen again, having to clench his teeth and squeeze his eyes tightly shut as he listened to his friend's pain, sobbing voice. They're gone. I'll never see them again. Marsh, I want my mom and dad, but they're gone. They're gone. I want them back, but they're gone. It had to be the most heartbreaking thing he'd ever endured, seeing his friend break over and over, shattering into thousands upon thousands of tiny little fragmented pieces. Those heartbreaking wails had been bad enough, but just seeing him sitting on the ground, stubborn Mo, strong Mo, always standing Mo who'd taken poundings like a champ, broken bones without so much as a tear, seeing him sobbing uncontrollably on the ground, Marshall had to do something, and a hug was the only thing he thought of. He'd expected to be shoved away, to be punched for giving in to his sissy-ass emotions, as Moko so lovingly had called them, but he wasn't. Instead, the younger teen held on to him like he was his lifeline, and cried even harder than he'd been before. And immediately felt his heart shatter as he grew painfully aware of how young not only Moko was, but how young they all were. He had turned 19 a few months after Fiona's birthday. Ash was closer to 19 than 18. The FP and Ember were only 18, but both Moko and Fiona were 17. He was older than she was by a few months, but still, a teenager he was. But more than that, he was still just a kid, a child in the eyes of the law, and more a child than an adult. That fact was never more painfully clear to him than when the younger teen began talking, sobbing about his mother's hot chocolate and the smell of his father's mechanic garage filled with cigarette smoke, how he kept going home, hoping that they'd be there, but they weren't. He finally let go of him, and Marshall prayed that he was going to stop these heartbreaking tears, but he didn't. It only got worse. Now he stared into the teary eyes of a lonely, lost, heartbroken child, who sobbed because he knew that his parents hadn't been there, that they'd never be there again, and this time it was Mo who reached for him as he continued to sob into Marshall's already tear-drenched, snot soaked shirt. Marshall clenched his teeth, squeezing his eyes shut, and trying so hard to stay strong for the child in his arms, because that's exactly what he was. He was a scared, broken child who just wanted his parents, and knew he'd never again have that chance. And as if the universe was proving his point, Mo spoke words aloud that had crushed what remained of Marshall's heart. They're gone. I'll never see them again. Marshall, I want my mom and dad, but they're gone. They're gone. I want them back, but they're gone. Fiona didn't know how he could sit there and do it. Hearing Moko's voice had her in silent tears as she stared at the boys before her. She had no idea how Marshall could handle it, how any of them could handle it. It was then that she realized that Marshall wasn't handling it. He too was crying silent tears and trying desperately not to, as he just continued to hold the inconsolable teen in his arms. He was biting his lip so hard he was drawing blood, the physical pain barely distracting him from the emotional pain. They sat with him like that for hours, Marshall hugging the sobbing boy tightly, Ignitus rubbing his shoulder and Ash patting his back, until either the emotional or physical exhaustion, but most likely a mixture of both, had put him to sleep. We can't let him sleep in here. He'll get sick, Ignitus said after quietly clearing his throat. It stopped raining. We can bring him up to the house, Fiona said softly. Yeah, Ash said, wiping his nose as he stood. FP, can you take him? My legs are asleep, Marshall said quietly, watching as the redhead lifted the sleeping teen up. He never realized just how small he was. He was a good friend, strong, and put up a great fight. That was all that mattered. But as he carried him back to the house, he felt as if he were holding a child instead of a 17-year-old. Marshall just sat there as FP and Ash headed to the house, but Fiona stayed behind, slowly approaching him. She watched as he pulled his t-shirt off, revealing a tank top underneath. Reaching him, Fiona sank down on her knees and hugged him from behind, feeling as he wrapped his hands around her arms. Fiona, he's just a kid. You're just a kid. We're all just kids. And 17 years? It's not long enough. 17 years to spend with your parents is just not long enough, he said, wiping his eyes. Life's unfair, Fiona said softly. No, not life. The world, the universe. It just takes and takes and takes, and it just doesn't stop. We think it stops, but it's only waiting to take the rest later. It doesn't stop, it never stops. It just waits, just for one more bite at you. Glob, it's cruel to take his parents away from him so young. He's just a kid. We're all just kids, because the moment we're screwed, we want nothing more than Mom and Dad to come and save the day, he said softly, wiping his eyes again, painfully aware that they would just not stop tearing up. What's on your mind, Marshall? Fiona asked softly, knowing that after this he would need to talk about it. Why didn't he tell us? Why didn't he tell me? Why did he wait and suffer alone for 3 months? Did did he not want to bother us? Was it because I was sick? Because M and FP were homeless? And because Ash and his mother were always getting into it? That are always getting into it? That he didn't want to bother us with it? Marshall asked, now looking around the hayloft. He didn't have to suffer alone, so why did he? Oh, wait, no. He didn't have to suffer alone, so why did he? Because when you finally admit that something's true by telling other people, it cements it into reality, Fiona said knowingly. It creates a whole new and different world, and I don't think he was ready to face that. Slowly, she released him, standing to her feet and offering him her hand. Fiona pulled Marshall to his feet, and immediately he pulled her into his arms. Fiona, I never want to see him break like that again, he whispered, releasing the blonde, yet keeping an arm around her as they headed towards the house. There is a cruel beauty to the world, a balance that is only rarely shifted. Where there is life, there is death. What brings heartache to some brings joy to others. 7 lives saved for 2 lives lost. He'd been dying and wanted his daughter to take over the company for the sole purpose of financial security. His heart was giving out, and on the same day he was admitted to the hospital, a matching organ donor had passed away only hours from him. She knew he was sick, his poor beautiful daughter. She just never knew how sick, and he refused to let on. To frighten her, she'd been through enough having to watch her mother die as a little girl. Now, 3 months later, he was feeling better than he'd ever had in years, a strong heart beating in his chest, and the scar to prove his life had been given a second chance. He heard the sound of shoes on the hardwood floor and looked up, spotting his daughter, the spitting image of his wife. Hey, Dad, how are you feeling? She asked softly, leaning against the doorway. They'd been fighting less often since the surgery, but it was still as if they'd walked around on eggshells around each other. Marceline, I'm doing wonderfully, thank you, he said, watching as she smiled a bit. Good, I'm glad to hear that. Finn's gonna come over and hang out for a bit, is that okay? As long as you keep the jam sessions down, Marcy, I'll be having a client over to discuss future albums. Okay, Dad, if you need anything, let me know. Will do, sweetie. She paused at the doorway before asking a question on her mind. Why do you want me to take over Nightosphere Records so badly? Because I think with your ear for music, you'll not only be amazing at it, but you'll make this company more successful than ever. I also wanted to leave you a legacy in case of my passing, something you could survive on for a very long time, he said softly as a knock came from the door. Mr. Aberdeen? Your 3 o'clock appointment has arrived. Young Miss Aberdeen, your guest has also arrived, and has taken the liberty of waiting for you in the music room. Please bring him up, Albert, Hudson said, watching as the man left the room, Marceline thanking him as he left. Dad, I want to try and make it on my own for a little bit. I want to live my life and get a job that sucks and struggle to live and work for it. So when the time comes that I may or may not decide to accept your proposal, if I do, I want to appreciate everything I earn. I've taken a lot of things for granted lately, and I don't want to make that mistake again, she said softly. I can appreciate and respect that, Marceline. It is in my will that all control and shares of the company goes to you, and it becomes yours. You can choose what is done with it as you wish. I hope to be around long enough to see you decide to take over by your own will. Hearing this, Marceline smiled. Thank you, Daddy. No problem, sweetie. Now don't leave your friend waiting. With a nod, Marceline walked from the room, leaving her father behind. Hudson was very much aware that his miracle was somebody's loss, and he had made it a point to discover who the donor of his new heart was, to see if there was maybe something he could do for the family. Oh, okay. That was really depressing. And I can't believe that just happened. And well, I can't believe it just happened 3 months ago, and that he's been struggling with this himself for 3 months. That's insane and really sad. But like, it is what it is. So I think I'm gonna stop there as far as it goes. I think I'm gonna stop there for now, and maybe record a little bit more when my mom's doing her meeting or whatever. So now this isn't exactly what you expected. It's maybe like, I don't know, 2.5 hours, or like maybe maybe between between 2 and 2.5 hours. But regardless of any, regardless of anything, it's 3:30, so this is the best I can do as far as recording. And I think I gotta be done now because these are really long chapters. It's really fucking depressing though, and I wish she didn't have to suffer with that alone. And I also just want to take a second to say how important being an organ donor is, because you could literally save somebody's life. Like, if you're in a car accident and you're dying, and because the book was talking about how he got the heart transplant and his life was saved, but and his life was saved, and so I just want to take a second to mention that. Mm. So I just wanted to take a second to mention that being an organ donor is a really good thing to do, and you should all be organ donors. I'm an organ donor, and this isn't me like trying to be a hero or trying to get credit for a good thing or whatever. I just want to say that you should all like sign up to be an organ donor, and it doesn't mean they're just gonna like come and harvest your organs if you're still alive. It's like, if you die, let's say from a heart attack or something, and someone needs a liver, then yeah, liver transplant. Although, why would someone? I don't think, do liver transplants. Are those a thing? My point is, like, say someone. Okay, let's say a kidney because they. Let's say a kidney because let's say a kidney because people actually do kidney transplants. But if you die of like a heart attack and your organs are intact, or even if you were in a car accident or something and your like organs are fine, as long as your organs aren't damaged, they can like use them for other people. So become an organ donor. It's really important, and we really need more organ donors. People like go on like these organ donor lists and they wait for like a really long time. Sometimes they could wait like months or years to get the organ that they need. So if you become an organ donor, it's like really important that you be it's really important that you can become an organ donor, and cut those lists down to size, and then people can get organs donated faster, and maybe will be a match for someone on those lists, and suddenly someone will be able to get an organ that they need to survive or whatever. Anyway, I just want to say that since, in the book it talked about how, Moko's parents died and then they were able to save someone else's life. So if you haven't signed up for being an organ donor, please consider it. It's really important and you could literally save someone's life. Anyway, I love each and every one of you guys. Please don't forget to always be yourself. You are valid, and I will see you on the next video. Bye!